Star Wars, Silver Oath. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76, Top of the Sky. Nan Eugen's answer surprised Nan Wuao. Second uncle, do you have a bad relationship with my father? It's not a secret. My eldest brother and I have had a bad relationship since we were young. He is the kind of elder brother who always likes to discipline me, the disobedient younger brother, on behalf of our parents. As for me, I'm the kind of free and lazy person who can't stand being disciplined. It's strange that we can have a good relationship. It's just that in front of you, we always have to act like brothers and sisters, and you were still young at the time, so you couldn't see it. Nan Wuao felt more and more strange after hearing this. On the surface, Nan Eugen seemed to be exposing his shortcomings, but in fact, this kind of self-exposure is more conducive to enriching his character image. Only young girls who are not familiar with the world will believe that a perfect second uncle is true, but anyone who has seen a little bit of the storm should know that there are no such wonderful people and things in fairy tales in this world, and too perfect must be disguised. Many times, appropriate smearing is conducive to increasing credibility, and what Nan Eugen is doing now is to smear himself appropriately. So, how should Nan Wuao feel about this? Just as he was thinking about it, he heard Nan Eugen say again, but my elder brother and I only had trivial conflicts when we were young. As I grow older, I actually respect my elder brother more and more. Because I realize more and more clearly that the reason why I can live a carefree life and even do whatever I want is that I have an elder brother who protects me from the wind and rain. He inherited the family business and also inherited the heaviest burden. In a year, how many days can he be truly free? On the contrary, I can run around and have fun everywhere. Nan Eugen said, raising his head slightly, as if he was lost in memories. Remember when you were little, I gave you a box of mechanical crafts from the Mon Calamari people, and you loved them so much. At that time, my brother looked at me with envy. You know, that was the first time I saw my brother envy others. He has been a model heir of the 4 major families since he was a child, and he is also my model brother. He is good at everything. Why should such a person envy others? But at that time, he was clearly envious of me, envious of my freedom, envious of my ability to bring you the gifts you like, but he didn't even have the leisure to choose gifts for his daughter. At this point, Nan Eugen was melancholy, and Nan Wuao's eyes were slightly red. Half of it was false, and half of it was true. Nan Eugen's words really hit the point and evoked her grief. However, Nan Wuao half helplessly and half self-mockingly found that even in grief, such thoughts would involuntarily emerge in her mind. After playing the character card, he started to play the emotional card. Second uncle really played a perfect role. How long had he rehearsed in advance to gain her trust? The sarcasm in Nan Wuao's mind did not affect her actual performance. She lowered her head, gently wiped the corners of her eyes, and said in a weak voice, second uncle. Nan Eugen said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say this to you, but I just can't help it for a while. But in short, even if it is to repay my brother's kindness to me over the years, I will do my best to help you get through this painful period of adjustment. Thank you, second uncle. What are you being polite about? This is what I should do. Well, let's not gossip here. Let's go to the skytop as soon as possible. The meeting you attended before is actually not important. The important thing is that you have to greet the members of the group's board of directors before and after the meeting. And in the hotel on the ground, you can't greet the people in the sky. Okay. Nan Wuao nodded and followed without hesitation. After all, she had no choice. In the city square in the center of Zhajing City, there is a magnificent space elevator connecting the city with the skytop outside the atmosphere. The building, which resembled the jade pillars in the myth of the universe, was not only a famous cultural landscape in the galaxy, but also a means of transportation exclusively for a very small number of privileged classes. Only those recognized by the Kyankan group were qualified to take the space elevator to the top of the sky, to stand on Zhajing, and to control the huge power that radiated the entire galaxy. Nan Wuai and Nan Yujin were such privileged classes. When the two came to the elevator door, the guard in charge respectfully opened the door for them. Identity confirmed. Lord Nan Yujin. Lord Nan Wuai, please come in. After passing the guards at the door, Nan Wuai whispered sarcastically, yesterday they told me that my pass had not yet been registered, so even if they knew my identity, they could not let me take the elevator. They also said that there are rules and no exceptions. I didn't expect the elevator pass to be registered so quickly, or did the rules of the Sky Dome change overnight? Nan Yujin sighed. Wuai, don't let such trivial matters affect your emotions. The death of my eldest brother was too sudden, and the power transfer has not yet been completed. You are still young, and there will definitely be people inside and outside the family who will try to stir up trouble. But the rules set by the Senate Council are still there, and you are still the first heir of the family, so as long as you don't lose your composure, all of this is just a minor problem. Compared with the storms you will face after you officially take over power, everything now is not worth mentioning. Nan Wuai said seriously, I understand. So don't think too much. With me here, those clowns won't be so proud for too long. Go up this time, and greet a few leaders first. This will also be a good start for you to gradually take over power in the future. Soon, the two of them followed the elevator corridor to the top of the sky outside the atmosphere. After the elevator door opened, Nan Wuai saw a simple and unsophisticated landscape. A wooden archway stood in front of him, with the three words top of the sky written on it in vigorous handwriting. Behind the archway was a green landscape garden. Kyankan Group reproduced the natural scenery of the planet's surface in the space station in an almost luxurious way. The design and cultivation of every plant and tree were carefully crafted, which made people feel relaxed and happy at first glance, and there was no feeling of crampedness in ordinary space buildings. The dense flowers and trees in the garden wrapped around the exquisite small buildings with red bricks and jade tiles. At the edge of the garden, you can vaguely see the bustling streets that look like a market. This is a living area on the top of the sky, which is reserved for a very small number of privileged people. Group board members like Nan Heli will have their own exclusive rooms in the garden. Beyond this landscape garden, you will come to the upper level of the sky, where you will see a solemn golden red hall. The wooden and stone structure stands on high stone steps, which makes people feel inexplicably pressured at a glance. There are dense buildings on both sides of the hall. That is the office area of the sky. It is here that the dignitaries from all over the galaxy discuss those strategic decisions that can affect hundreds of billions of people. Yesterday, Nan Wuai was in the meeting hall to listen to the high-level meeting on the adjustment of the group's financial strategy. As the leading financial giant in the group, Nanming Capital should have a decisive say in financial strategy. However, throughout the meeting, Nan Wuai didn't even have the qualification to listen to the whole process, let alone speak. At the end of the meeting, she was respectfully invited out of the venue. Chapter 77 The Collapse of an Idol. According to the charter of Kyankan Group, Nan Wuai, as the heir of Nanming Capital, is only qualified to listen to half of the meeting before she officially takes over the power. However, even so, she is the heir of the four major families after all, and using rigid rules to require her is a great contempt. Outside the venue, Nan Wuai even felt that she was more dangerous and helpless than when she was ambushed in the asteroid belt. At this time, she couldn't help but feel a lot of emotions when she revisited the old place. What will be staged next will most likely be the drama of the jumping clowns being defeated under the light of the wise and powerful Nan Yujin. Although she knew that all this might be just a script, she actually had some expectations in her heart. And Nan Wuai did not hide this feeling. It is better to say that it is easier to create a harmless image by showing this mentality of eagerness for revenge. Uncle, are you going to seek justice for what happened yesterday? Nan Yujin sighed, not playing the role of a brilliant hero, but said, Wuai, remember, we are not here to seek justice. Justice is not important on the top of the sky. If you insist on so-called justice, you will inevitably be looked down upon. Nan Wuai looked puzzled. Nan Yujin said, this is indeed a bit unpleasant to hear, but think about it. If the top of the sky is really fair, then why have the four major families always dominated the long history of the Kyanxing system? Is it because the talents of the four major families are better than others? This question was somewhat beyond Nan Wuiao's expectations. It directly touched upon the ruling foundation of the Kyankan group, and was undoubtedly an out-of-scope question. Nan Yujin smiled and asked, even within the four major families, is there justice? For example, is the eldest son inheritance system fair? This question made Nan Wuiao's heart jump. Nan Yujin laughed. For me, it is indeed fair. My eldest brother is much better than me, and I'm convinced. But in the long history of the four major families, there are countless unqualified eldest sons. In fact, the eldest son inheritance system that has been successfully implemented only accounts for half of the countless power transfers. There are countless usurpers and traitors, because this inheritance system itself is not fair. Nan Yujin paused, as if observing Nan Wuiao's reaction. Seeing that she was listening seriously, he laughed again. But what if it's unfair? There are so many talented and strategic people in history, and no one has overturned this injustice. Therefore, fairness or not is not important. Nan Wuiao asked, so what is important? Nan Yujin stretched out his hand and tapped his temple. It's here. Nan Wuiao showed a puzzled expression. Wisdom? Wrong, it's an idea. Nan Yujin said, wisdom will only make people good at calculating, obsessed with pros and cons, and then pursue the so-called justice. But justice itself is a fundamental shake to the rule of the four major families. So compared to wisdom, the sky is more concerned with people's subjective will. Nan Wuiao was even more puzzled. What do you mean? I hope things will be done this way. So things will be done this way. There is no need to pay attention to pros and cons, let alone justice and fairness. Say what you want and do whatever you want. This is the core of the word power. Remember, it is the people of the four major families who hold power, not power that holds the four major families. Don't be a puppet of power. Nan Wuiao's scalp numbed slightly when he heard it. Did the second uncle really know what he was talking about? Comparing the four major families to tyrants who do whatever they want. Is he going to subvert the ruling foundation of the Kyan galaxy? Exclamation mark. Moreover, why did he say these words to himself at this time? Want to encourage himself to become an arrogant and extravagant person, anger the board of directors, and then lose the qualification of inheritance? Or did he have some bold and reckless behavior that needed this excuse to excuse himself? For a moment, Nan Wuiao felt that his mind was in a mess, and he was at a loss. Seeing this, Nan Yujin smiled as expected and said, is it difficult to understand? That's right, at your age now, what you have learned and seen are mostly those old-fashioned theories in books. It is too early to understand the reality. I'm afraid that my elder brother has not had time to teach you his real skills. Hearing this, Nan Wuiao couldn't help but retort, father is not that kind of person. Nan Yujin stopped and fell silent. After a long time, the middle-aged man shook his head and said earnestly, I have always felt guilty towards my eldest brother over the years, so some things are not easy to say. But Wuiao, now that my eldest brother is not here, I'm the only one who can tell you some harsh but honest advice. I hope you can forgive me. Nan Wuiao laughed instead of being angry and said softly, please give me some advice, second uncle. I admit that my eldest brother is a very good leader, and he handles most of the family affairs fairly and appropriately, but he is ultimately a member of the board of directors and a member of the elders council recognized by the four major families. So he is not qualified to keep himself out of it. When the group needs him to become a tyrannical tyrant, he has no choice. For example, Nan Yujin said, for example, board members are not only responsible for their own family affairs, but also for the strategy of the entire group. When those unfair strategic decisions are made, your father, as a member qualified to vote, also needs to be held responsible. Nan Wuiao frowned and was speechless. 5 years ago, B Group encountered a debt crisis. Kyankan Group launched a propaganda machine and mobilized a large number of civilian forces to fill the hole. Only half of the funds were finally put into practice, and the remaining half was distributed among the pockets of various directors. And the Big Brother's Manor renovation project in the asteroid belt used that money. Nan Wuiao widened his eyes in disbelief. This is impossible. Impossible. If you only look at the financial report, of course you will think it is impossible. But don't forget that Nanming Capital has the most brilliant accountant in the entire galaxy, and any accounting can be done perfectly. But, yes, from a basic logical point of view, you will also think it is impossible. Big Brother is the leader of the family, with countless assets under his name. Why does he need to use such means to transform a manor? But if Big Brother doesn't take the money, how will those who take it look? He is not short of money. Doesn't everyone on the board lack money? Besides, who would find money difficult to handle? Therefore, going along with the crowd is an inevitable choice. When Nan Wuao heard this, her knuckles turned white when she clenched her fists, and her head was buzzing. She felt that the world she knew was collapsing piece by piece. Although everything just now was just empty talk from Nan Yujin, Nan Wuao knew very well that the other party was not lying. No one can become the leader of the 4 major families with a clean record. As the heir, Nan Wuao knew this better than anyone else. In fact, in order to take back the inheritance left by her father in the manor, she had contacted pirates privately, which had already broken the laws of the Kyan star system. Seeing that Nan Wuao was speechless, Nan Yujin said, I know it's hard for you to accept it for a while. After all, this is just the empty talk of middle-aged uncle who has a bad relationship with your father. No, that's not what I meant. It doesn't matter, I won't force you, but there are some things you will have to face sooner or later, so come with me first. Chapter 78, Distinguishing Public and Private Affairs. Nan Yujin led the way and came to the building complex next to the meeting hall. This maze-like building complex is like the brain of Kyankan Group, where countless elites conscientiously provide advice to the decision makers. Many people joked that compared to the magnificent meeting hall, the real key part of Kyankan Group is actually the building complex on the left and right sides. Because with the assistance of those think tanks, even a chicken can become a qualified director of the board of directors. When Nan Wuao walked into this building complex, she couldn't help feeling a little uneasy. This is the forbidden area of the board of directors that she has never had the opportunity to set foot in as the heir of the Nan family. However, under the leadership of Nan Yujin, it is like walking on flat ground. The guards didn't even ask about their identities and respectfully made way. So what does this mean? Is Nan Yujin showing off his power in the board of directors? Wuao, don't be so reserved. Nan Yujin walked in front and told the woman behind him without looking back, you are the heir of the Nan family, you can be more open. Nan Wuao nodded. Nan Yujin explained, it is true that this is the location of the most elite think tank of Kyankan Group, but the think tank is always just a service staff, and we are the leaders of Kyankan Group. Their wisdom is only meaningful when it is used by us, just like a computer with amazing performance. Do you expect and respect computers? Nan Wuao took a deep breath and nodded again. I understand. Don't rush to understand. Inheriting the eldest brother's legacy cannot be achieved overnight. Let's take it slowly. Let's start with the first lesson today. As they were talking, the two had already arrived in front of a warehouse-like building. Behind the door stood an office desk. Behind the desk was a skinny old man with sparse and grey hair, typing on the keyboard with his hands flying. Nan Yujin raised a smile and greeted, Nan Kiwen, long time no see. The skinny old man was stunned for a moment, turned his head, pushed the auxiliary lens on his nose, adjusted the focus, and then he could see Nan Yujin's face clearly, so he quickly stood up and greeted him hoarsely. It's the second young master. It's been a long time. Don't call me young master. You've been a greasy middle-aged man for a long time. Nan Yujin laughed, but did not say too much. Instead, he got straight to the point. Do you have the minutes of yesterday's meeting? Nan Kiwen turned his head, adjusted the focus of the lens, and smiled. What you said isn't this what we in the board secretary's office do? Give me a copy of the whole thing. I've been away from home for a long time recently, and I can't keep up with the situation. Okay. Nan Kiwen tapped on the keyboard without hesitation, completing the document review, export, and copying operations, and finally handed a holographic disk to Nan Yujin. Nan Yujin said, thank you very much. I will destroy it on time. Haha, second young master, you don't have to be so rigid. You can read it anytime you want. Anyway, it's not something I should hide from you. After saying that, Nan Kiwen bowed his head to the documents again, hunched over and typing the manuscript. Nan Yujin didn't bother him again, and walked out of the room with Nan Wuao. As soon as he went out, Nan Wuya was a little amused and asked curiously, "Is this okay? The minutes of the board of directors meeting should be top secret, right?" Nan Yujin handed the holographic disc to Nan Wuya and said, "It's top secret, but Nan Kiwen and I have been friends for 30 years, so it's more convenient for me to get the files from him than from my eldest brother. Now, do you understand what I mean by the word relationship?" Nan Wuya took the holographic disc and was silent. "Okay, let's go back and read the minutes slowly, and then we'll go to the next stop." The next stop Nan Yujin mentioned was a small courtyard with a private entrance located in the building complex. In the several exquisite and simple buildings in the courtyard, many staff members were running around, busy. Nan Yujin greeted everyone enthusiastically and then found the director of the courtyard, a middle-aged woman who looked about the same age as him, and said, "Nanjing, who is responsible for drafting the board agenda now? I need him to help me add an attendee for the next meeting." Nanjing looked embarrassed. "This is a confidential matter." Nan Yujin sighed. "Alas, I know that, so I came to bother you. After all, I don't want to disturb Elder Yibo for such a small matter." Hearing the 4 words Elder Yibo, Nanjing's expression froze, as if someone had grasped her vitals. After a long time, she relaxed and said, "Well, anyway, the Elders Council will definitely support you. The person who is currently in charge of managing the recent board agendas is Chen Lu, an old man from the secretariat. Don't tell me that I told you. Don't worry, how could I betray my own family?" Nan Yujin smiled and waved goodbye to Nanjing. After walking out of the courtyard, Nan Yujin stopped smiling and explained to Nan Wuya, "My relationship with Nanjing is not as good as that with Nan Kiwen, so I have to bring up my relationship in the Senate to get any information. If it were the eldest brother, I would not have to ask. Nanjing would naturally arrange everything, and I would not even have to go to Chenlu alone. However, who made me not the eldest brother? So next we have to visit Chenlu and ask him to help. Fortunately, I have a good relationship with him." Nan Wuya said, "Second uncle, it doesn't have to be so troublesome." "No, it has to be so troublesome," Nan Yujin said firmly. "Power is not a flower that is placed there for people to pick when they are ready, but a treasure coveted and fought for by countless people. If you can't show your determination to win as soon as possible, those who stir up trouble will become more and more aggressive. You don't want what happened yesterday to happen again, right?" Nan Wuya nodded helplessly and stopped arguing. The next stop is the living area of the skytop, which is the landscape garden. Chen Lu from the secretariat is also a member of the board of directors. As a heavyweight of the Chen family among the 4 major families, he has his own independent room in the garden, and he lives here most of the time. Although it is not as vast as those wealthy manors on the ground, the luxury of the sky roof is achieved to the extreme in the exquisite space. Food, clothing, housing and transportation are all incredibly particular, so there are many long-term residents in the garden. After Nan Yujin knocked on Chen Lu's courtyard door, he bowed to the vigorous old man behind the door and said, "Mr. Chen, long time no see." Chen Lu snorted, "Nan's boy, don't be so falsely polite. Just say what you want to say." Nan Yujin smiled and said, "I'm really thirsty after walking all the way. Can Mr. Chen give me a cup of tea so we can chat while drinking?" Chen Lu stared at him for a while, but finally couldn't hold his face anymore, and laughed and scolded, "You little brat, you're already old, but you're still so unruly. You want to get my tea, but no way. I only have plain water, you can drink it or not." Nan Yujin said, "Mr. Chen, the plain water here is made from natural ice collected from the asteroid belt. If I have the opportunity to drink it, of course I will. No one asked you to drink it. Just 1 cup, and get out after you finish it." When Chen Lu said this, his eyebrows were completely relaxed, and his face was full of smiles. After that, Chen Lu took the 2 into his reception room. The space is not large, but it is thoughtful and meticulous everywhere. From seats to desks, from display cabinets to ornamental plants, every detail in the room is tailored for the residents. However, on the other hand, this meticulousness will undoubtedly reveal a lot of information about the owner. For example, Chen Lu has a bad lumbar spine, so the cushions on the seat are particularly soft. He is left-handed, so the holographic tablet and office supplies on the desk are placed on the left. He has a special liking for currency collection, and more than 100 kinds of physical currencies are displayed in the display cabinet. These personal information are not very useful, and usually only very close people will be invited in. So Nan Wuya was really surprised. She really didn't expect that her second uncle's network of contacts was so wide that even the people in the Chen family would sell him face. In her impression, her father had complained many times that the people in the Chen family were very difficult to get along with. Is this what Nan Yujin wants to show off? After Nan Yujin sat down, he got straight to the point and said, "Mr. Chen, I came here to bother you this time, not only to ask for tea and water, but most importantly to ask for a seat on the board of directors for my niece." Chen Lu took a sip of tea and sighed. "You are such a good talker. The Chen and Nan families have been in constant trade friction for decades. Why should I ask for benefits for the girl from the Nan family?" Nan Yujin smiled and said, "Because Mr. Chen is very clear about private matters. There may be some conflicts between the Chen and Nan families, but Mr. Chen still invited me, a member of the Nan family, to have tea. Did you use the phrase separate public and private so carelessly? Besides, there's only water here, no tea. Don't try to take advantage of the situation." Chen Lu glared at Nan Yujin, and then said, "You're right. Family affairs are family affairs. The second and third brothers have left me out of the group's decision-making level for so many years, and I have no obligation to consider their faces too much. From my personal point of view, it is petty to exclude Nan Hela's daughter from the board of directors. The four major families have jointly ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, and they have long been inseparable from each other. Temporary suppression can only vent one's anger, but sooner or later it will be paid back. Why bother?" Nan Yujin smiled more enthusiastically. "So, Mr. Chen, you agree?" Chen Lu said, "The official seat on the board of directors must be collectively reviewed and voted on by the board of directors. It's useless to tell me. I can only let her be an attendee at most. Thank you very much." While speaking, Nan Yujin secretly winked at Nan Wuya. Nan Wuya secretly sighed in his heart, followed Nan Yujin, and saluted Chen Lu to express his gratitude. "Let's skip the red tape, it's not a big deal." Chen Lu waved his hand and said, "It's a pity that your father's manner is gone." Nan Wuya was stunned when he heard this. Fortunately, Nan Yujin took over the conversation in time. "It's just temporarily controlled by Kyankan security. Besides, for us, such a manner can be rebuilt at any time." Chen Lu smiled and said, "Okay, then when the new manor is built, I will give you a pound of tea as a gift." "Thank you very much." The conversation ended here. Nan Yujin drank the white water in the cup and tried to wink at Nan Wuya. Nan Wuya also drank the water in the cup and stood up to say goodbye. Chapter 79. Unavoidable Questions. After leaving Chen Lu's courtyard, Nan Yujin laughed and said, "Congratulations, Wuya. Chen Lu is easier to talk to than I expected. With his support, you will no longer be treated coldly in the board of directors. Although he has lost power in the political struggle of the Chen family, he is still a veteran of the Chen family and has a strong influence. The fact that you can get Chen Lu's support is enough to shake the positions of many neutral parties." Nan Wuya had to admit that Nan Yujin was right. Even if the other party had ulterior motives, it would be very beneficial for him to help him win an ally like Chen Lu. However, Nan Wuya did not believe that such a good thing would come for nothing and without cost. Nan Yujin had already released his goodwill, and now it was Nan Wuya's turn to give back. However, Nan Wuya couldn't think of how to repay this all-powerful uncle at this moment. Just as she was lost in thought, she heard Nan Yujin say, "Wuya, just now old Chen mentioned your father's manner. Can you tell what he really wants to say?" Nan Wuya was startled when she heard this, and then answered frankly, "It's not like we were talking about the manner itself, but more like exchanging codes." That's right, what Chen Lu and I talked about just now was not the manner of DUI 9527, but the division of spoils. Division of spoils? The money from B Group. That's right, as I said before, the debt crisis of B Group has made many people in the four major families rich. The spoils that the eldest brother got were used to rebuild the manor. and the spoils that Chenlu got were used to set up a natural ice mining station in the asteroid belt, which is dedicated to supplying the most expensive water resources in the galaxy to a few people in the Chen family. When Nan Wuiao heard this, she couldn't help but feel disgusted. Although rationally, she had already agreed with Nan Yujin's words. As the head of the family, it is impossible for the father to rule the family with clean hands. The manor that carried her beautiful memories was probably built on countless stolen money. But emotionally, she really didn't want to talk about this topic too much. So Nan Wuiao easily diverted the topic. Is that so? But it seems to be no different from ordinary water when I drink it. Does it need to be different? Nan Yujin asked back. As long as it is precious and rare enough, it will naturally become the most respected and precious nectar by people. In that glass of water, it is soaked with the word power. After speaking, Nan Yujin said, of course, this is just the opinion of someone like me who is not presentable. In fact, Chenlu's mining station has submitted a report that proves that the natural ice in the asteroid belt contains rich trace element. Long-term drinking can prolong life and prevent all diseases. Nan Wuiao smiled and said, it is indeed the style of the Chen family. Seeing that the topic has turned to an irrelevant field, Nan Wuiao finally breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, looking at Nan Yujin again, the gentle, slightly fat middle-aged man seemed to have become more friendly. No matter what his purposes, at this moment, in this cold capital of the Kyan galaxy, he is the only one he can rely on. After that, the two of them talked and laughed briefly about the vanity of the Chen family and even the four major families, making the atmosphere between the uncle and nephew more harmonious. It was not until they were completely away from the Chen family's courtyard that Nan Yujin returned to the topic and said, in short, for the sake of sharing the spoils in the past, Chenlu's relationship is used. Starting from the next meeting, you can at least listen to the whole process. As for the voting rights, you may have to wait a little longer. Nan Wuiao said, it doesn't matter. I believe that what belongs to me cannot be taken away by anyone. Well, this is the determination I want. Nan Yujin nodded in approval and seemed unperturbed by Nan Wuiao's declaration, as if this was indeed a matter of course and there was no need to comment, and as if Nan Wuiao's determination was not worth mentioning at all. After that, let's go to eldest brother's room and have a rest. Nan Wuiao shook his head. No need, I will move in openly after I officially inherit my father's estate. I can move in now, only because of your relationship, second uncle, and I don't like it. Nan Yujin was stunned and silent for a long time. He moved his lips several times before sighing. Your ambitions are higher than I thought. This is good, really good. If eldest brother could see you like this, he would surely feel gratified. Nan Wuiao lowered his head, his face showing melancholy. After a moment, Nan Yujin asked again, what do you plan to do next? I plan to go back to Zun directly. The board meeting has ended, and there is no point in staying in Zurging. Why is it meaningless? Nan Yujin said, Zurging is the capital of the Kyan star system. More than half of the elders of the four major families live in Zurging. If you want to successfully inherit your eldest brother's legacy, it is very important to get the recognition of the elders. Nan Wuiao said, I know. But now I'm not qualified to have an equal dialogue with the elders of other families. Staying in Zurging is nothing more than following my second uncle to build relationships. Of course, I'm not doubting my second uncle's ability. But as the heir to the family, I can't always hide behind my second uncle. When my father inherited the family business, he relied on his own strength to gain recognition from everyone step by step. Nan Yujin fell silent again after hearing this, and after a long time he sighed. I understand. On this issue, you have thought more deeply and appropriately than me. Hey, no wonder it was my eldest brother who inherited the family business. I, a lazy boy, am really far worse than him. Second uncle, you. Well, since you have this determination, then go back, as soon as possible, and integrate the power of Nanming capital. Although there will be many ups and downs, I believe you can overcome all difficulties, and become the head of the family smoothly like my eldest brother did in the past. Thank you, second uncle. Nan Yujin smiled. I still have some things to deal with in Zurging, and I may not be able to accompany you home. By the way, why are you alone here? Where is Nan Zhao? Hearing this name, Nan Wuyao's body suddenly became stiff. She really didn't want to mention this topic, but Nan Yujin's question was reasonable and there was no way to avoid it. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. Nan Yujin said, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to pry into your family affairs. I'm just a little curious about why the always nagging housekeeper left you alone in Ziyajing. Although the headquarters of the Nan family is in Zun, there are enough people here to take care of you. Anyway, sorry, I won't ask anymore." This attitude of retreating to advance made Nan Wuyao feel more embarrassed. If Nan Yujin was just an unrelated passerby, she could of course nod and say that it would be better not to ask. But he was not a passerby, but the helper that Nan Wuyao needed to rely on the most now. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was her backbone. Moreover, he had just released his kindness and helped Nan Wuyao solve a huge problem. Besides, even if Nan Wuyao didn't say it, couldn't Nan Yujin find out? Almost everything was on the table, and he could find out the whole picture by just asking someone. Therefore, Nan Wuyao had no way to avoid the other party's questions. Chapter 80 Accumulation of Trust. After a long silence, Nan Wuyao finally spoke. "Uncle, you are suspicious. It's not that I don't trust you, but it's really hard to talk about it." Nan Yujin said, "So, do you want to go to Big Brother's room to talk? After all, this is not the place to talk." Nan Wuyao looked at the space elevator that was so close and shook his head. "No, it will spread sooner or later. I guess it has already spread in the sky, so there is nothing to hide. Nan Zhao is a traitor. He arranged pirates to assassinate me and froze my bank account. In fact, I'm in a hurry to go back now, and I also want to unfreeze my account as soon as possible because other application channels are blocked." At the end, Nan Wuyao even thought it was ridiculous and couldn't help but sneer. The heir of the Nan family had her account frozen by her own bank, and she had to go to the bank to apply for unfreezing in person. Is there any other heir of the 4 major families who is so poor and wronged in the world? Nan Yujin was dumbfounded when he heard this. He was stunned for a long time before he couldn't help but said, "Wuyao, are you serious? Second uncle, do you think I would joke about this? Nan Zhao has served my elder brother for almost 30 years. He is just like Li Kaiang, a personal attendant approved by the Council of Elders. How could he betray the Nan family?" Nan Yujin's mention of Li Kaiang made Nan Wuyao's heart ache. The maid who was loyal to her had been out of contact for a long time. Kaiang and security, who should have been responsible for her safety, covered up all the facts. But Nan Wuyao didn't dare to ask too eagerly. After all, she was the one who hired the pirates, and she was not innocent in this matter. Nan Yujin sighed and said, "What happened at home during my absence? How did everything change? Forget it. I won't stay in Ziyajing anymore. Let's go home together. On the way, tell me everything in detail. Now is not the time to worry about face. Wuyao, your life safety is more important than anything else." Nan Wuyao said, "I understand." Half a day later, on Nan Yujin's private spaceship, Nan Wuyao finally finished her recent experience. She tried hard to control her emotions and described a series of heavy blows in a straightforward manner, as if she was telling someone else's story with an indifferent attitude. However, as a listener, Nan Yujin was sweating and breathing faster. It's simply unbelievable. Finally, Nan Yujin concluded, "Big Brother's death is already unbelievable enough, and your subsequent experiences are even more. What on earth are the people in the Council of Elders thinking?" Nan Wuyao laughed sarcastically. "I also want to know, so I have been asking Nan Zhao how to ask. After all, it is him, not me, who can directly contact the Council of Elders, but you saw the result." Nan Yujin sighed. "Big Brother should have let you take over a few years earlier. Otherwise why would you be cut off from the dialogue channel with the Council of Elders by Nan Zhao?" Nan Wuyao's smile became even more sarcastic. "It should be said that, if the Council of Elders really wanted to see me, why would they be cut off from the dialogue by Nan Zhao?" This time, Nan Yujin could not refute it. "This point does not make sense, but there is no point in thinking about it here. I will find a way to ask after I go home. Although I'm not the heir to the family, I still have some friendship with a few old guys. I should be able to get some information out of them by coaxing them a little." Second uncle, thank you very much. I told you, you're welcome. Besides, this matter is not unrelated to me. The Council of Elders can tolerate my eldest brother's accidental death, and can tolerate a mere servant like Nanze's how to plot an assassination against you. Of course, they can also tolerate others to kill me. We are the closest relatives. If one suffers, all will suffer. After a pause, Nan Yujin asked again, also, what's the matter with the Silver Knights? Nan Wuya responded subconsciously, who knows? Li Yu changes his name every now and then. It was called the Silver Sect before. Oh, sorry, I mean, that organization has always been unpredictable. If I hadn't had to, I would never have thought that I would actually rely on the power of an inexplicable pirate organization. Nan Yujin corrected, that's not a pirate organization. The name of the Silver Sect has spread throughout the planet since my eldest brother and I were young. The Nan family and the Silver Sect have a very long history of cooperation. They rely on the Nan family to obtain various survival resources, and the Nan family relies on them to maintain the stability of the wasteland, and occasionally entrusts them to do things that they are not convenient to do. But I've never heard of anyone saying that Bain's power is so strong, relying on a self-modified spaceship, breaking out of an ambush, and annihilating the opponent. This is something that even the ace warship of Kyankan security can never do. Nan Wuya said self-deprecatingly, it seems that their high fees are really justified. Nan Yujin said, generally speaking, such a team cannot be hired, no matter how much money is spent. He is willing to help you. It can be said that it is the influence of the eldest brother, or it can be said that it is your luck. But luck alone is far from enough. You need to grasp this power more tightly. In this abnormal situation, Bain is enough to be your trump card to turn the tables. Nan Wuya asked, second uncle's evaluation of Bain is so high. Whether it is high or not, you have the answer in your heart. If it weren't for Bain, it would be difficult for you to pass the Nanzazhao level. And the risks you will face later must also come from the dark. I'm afraid no one is more professional than Bain in dealing with the dark side. At least you can't trust Kyankan security, right? Nan Wuya clenched his fists when he heard about Kyankan security, and a surge of hatred and anger surged in his heart. Because Nan Heli died under the close care of Kyankan security, and her closest person Li Kyang also lost contact because of Kyankan security. So, what should I do specifically? Tell Li Yu frankly? Nan Yujin shook his head. It's not appropriate. After all, Bain is not one of us. As far as I know, whether it's my eldest brother or the head of the Nan family before him, their cooperation with Bain is limited, and they will never trust each other without reservation. In fact, for people who grew up in the wasteland, we, the children of aristocratic families, are untrustworthy objects. So he is also very cautious in contact with you, right? Nan Wuya admitted, even the discount price is very high. And after experiencing the ambush in the asteroid belt, I'm afraid Bain's trust in you will be greatly reduced. After all, they are also victims, and you can even be regarded as half a perpetrator. At this time, your frankness will only make the other party doubt your true intentions. I think you might as well slow down the pace, just like cultivating a customer, and accumulate mutual trust step by step. Nan Wuya thought. In other words, continue to issue commissions, to get familiar with each other? Yes, in this process, we can let the people of Bain gradually get closer to the truth of the matter and the core power circle of the Nan family. Of course, we can only get closer, we can't really bring outsiders in. In this way, we can gradually win the trust of the other party. Chapter 81, Work and Rest. When the Silver Knights were about to welcome a big client, Sin had a fulfilling vacation. When he woke up from his overworked sleep, he found himself back in the underground base of the Red Apricot team. There was a message from Li Yu in his bracelet. Congratulations on getting the next 2 weeks of vacation time. Please rest in the base and prepare for the next round of overtime. Sin certainly didn't want to waste 2 weeks of vacation time. After a long talk with Li Yu, he couldn't calm down at all. However, when he wanted to leave the base, he was stopped by Enping. I'm sorry, but vacation is mandatory. Please stay in the base and don't run around. Sin was shocked. So I'm imprisoned? Enping scratched his head and explained. In the past, For various reasons, many overtime maniacs appeared in the Silver Organization. They worked day and night, forgot to eat and sleep, and then died young. The good laborers who could have worked hard and contributed to the organization for decades have become a lot of pensions in just a few years. This is really unfriendly to the organization, so now vacation is mandatory. Hearing this, SYN didn't know whether to admire the Silver Organization, a civilian organization regarded by many as pirates, whose welfare policy actually includes pensions, or to condemn it for causing such a serious tragedy. But in any case, this rule is an obstacle for SYN. It is true that he was exhausted physically and mentally after carrying out 2 consecutive missions, and a good sleep could only restore half of his energy at most, but he really didn't have time to waste on vacation. The truth of Nanhel's death is still hidden behind the fog, the safety of the master is still unknown, and the debt he owes has not been reduced by a single cent. There are still many things to do. However, when SYN was about to fight with Anping, he heard the other party ask, "Do you have anything important?" "Of course. With your current situation, can you do it?" SYN was speechless. As a Jedi apprentice, SYN would not underestimate himself, but on the other hand, everything he experienced in the Kyan galaxy made him understand the truth of not being arrogant. Even the omnipotent master is in trouble. A mere Jedi apprentice, relying on his own strength, is indeed too weak. Anping said earnestly, "So you will have to rely on the help of others. Then think about it. Will your impatience help you get help from others? Will others see that you work day and night and do not care about your body, and will they also work day and night?" SYN fell into thought again. Anping said, "SYN, do you know who is the most annoying person in an organization, such as a company?" SYN tried to answer, "The boss who forces you to work overtime." It's an alternative answer, but it's not the correct answer. Anping said, "The most annoying people are those colleagues who work harder than you and almost unconditionally cater to the wishes of their superiors." SYN was puzzled. Why? Bosses are certainly hateful in many ways, but bosses and employees are not in the same class, and people have long been accustomed to the harshness of those in power. And after all, you still rely on the boss for your salary, so how much can you hate him? But colleagues are different. They are obviously in the same class as you, but they cannot share the same hatred for the enemy, and even stab you in the back. This sense of betrayal is the easiest to generate hatred. SYN was even more puzzled. How can working harder and catering to the wishes be considered a stab in the back? Because that makes you look like you are not working hard enough and don't know how to cater to the boss's wishes. Anping laughed. If everyone is a mess, the boss can't do anything about it. After all, the law cannot control the masses. But if someone stands out, the boss has a reason to discipline everyone. To put it in a broader sense, those who work hard and make progress are equivalent to using their own selfishness to harm the interests of the whole. SYN still found it difficult to understand. According to Anping's statement, it would be best for the company's employees to just eat and wait for death. Then if the company goes bankrupt in the end, how will the employees make a living? Anping said, "It seems that your growth environment is too idealistic, and some simple truths can't be understood. But whether you understand it or not, just remember this conclusion. Most ordinary people don't like people around them to work too hard. The more anxious you are, the more likely it is that haste makes waste." SYN thought about it and accepted this somewhat absurd theory for the time being. Moreover, Liu has promised to help him collect intelligence, and now all he has to do is to fully trust him. Based on his understanding of Liu, if he urges to hastily, it may have the opposite effect. Anping added, Bain has always advocated a combination of work and rest. Even the Red Apricot Squad, which is regarded as a madhouse by many people, will choose to take a full rest outside of the standard working hours. SYN looked at the sweat on Anping's body with suspicion. "Captain, how did you sweat so much during your rest?" Anping said, "I just went for a 20-kilometer jog and did a few sets of boxing." "What's wrong?" But Anping suddenly smiled again. "By the way, it's a rare vacation. Do you want to practice with me?" SYN wanted to say that he would rather go to the Kyankan intranet to find information during his vacation, but before he could answer, he saw Anping suddenly stretched out his left hand and grabbed his shoulder. Scene subconsciously reached out to block it, but saw Anping's arm bent in the air like a rope, directly avoiding Scene's block, and firmly grasped Scene's shoulder. Is this really bent? Scene looked closely, and was surprised to find that Anping's arm was not only twisted in the direction of the anti-joint, but also extended a little, so it was in the shape of a rope. Anping smiled and said with ease, surprised. Scene was indeed surprised, and nodded and said, I didn't expect that you are also proficient in acrobatics, Captain. But if there is less cold sweat on your forehead, you will look more relaxed. Anping finally couldn't hold back his face after hearing this, and gritted his teeth and said, it's crazy that you can be relaxed when your joint is seriously dislocated. The next moment, Zubo's voice came from outside the door again. Captain, I have a panacea here that can make you relaxed at any time. Get out. Anping refused without looking back, and by the way, he used his mechanical right hand to put the dislocated arm back to its original position and carefully applied Bacter ointment. Scene asked, Captain, do you want to teach me to control my joints freely like you? I can't say I can control them freely. I can only make some small movements that catch ordinary people off guard. But these small movements can often determine life and death on the battlefield. Imagine if I had a dagger in my hand just now, what would you do now? Scene thought about it, and found that the result was indeed not optimistic. Although Anping's dislocation method would seriously weaken his attack power, so that when his palm landed on Scene's shoulder, there was almost no impact. But if Anping held a sharp dagger, it would not take much strength to easily cut the opponent's throat. Thinking of this, Scene did have some interest in Anping's acrobatics. As we all know, GD Knights wield the sharpest weapons in the galaxy. Seeing Scene's interest, Anping added, besides that, I have some other acrobatics to teach you, such as. Before he finished speaking, Anping's left fist, which had just been dislocated, and was still covered with ointment, came to Scene like lightning. The speed was so fast, that the GD apprentice could hardly react. When he subconsciously tilted his head back, the wind from Anping's fist had already blown up his hair in front of his forehead. Scene couldn't help but recall the entry test he experienced when he first came to the Red Apricot team. At that time, Anping's explosive power had already surprised Scene. This time, although Anping's movement seemed gentle, his speed was actually even faster than during the test. Scene concluded that, if he fought with the captain, unless he exerted the power of the force and the lightsaber to the extreme, he would be defeated, no matter how he fought. Although Anping won the test in a miserable way, it was actually just because he didn't care about being miserable. In essence, he was really at ease. However, although Scene had greatly overestimated the captain's fighting ability, when he truly appreciated Anping's fancy acrobatics, he found that the opponent's strength still exceeded his expectations. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Progress. Anping's acrobatics classroom is located in a small training ground in the underground base. This training ground was built by Anping for himself, and he spent a lot of effort. As soon as he entered the door, Scene could feel the extraordinariness of it. Although this training ground is small, the internal facilities are highly complex, and various obstacles made of high-strength metal almost occupy most of the space of the training ground. The open and spacious area in the field is about 20 to 30 square meters, surrounded by half-high obstacles, which looks a bit like an indoor fighting competition venue. The narrow and cramped places are divided into several parts. There is a patio that is only 4 or 5 square meters, but more than 10 meters high. There is a narrow passage that is half a meter wide and more than 1 meter high, and there is a small square that is cut into countless fragmented spaces by obstacles of different heights. What does this mean? Scene was a little confused. Anping said, environmental training room. I think you know that there is a huge difference between the actual combat environment and the ring environment. This is the training ground I designed to simulate the actual combat environment. Scene was highly skeptical. As a GD apprentice, he had been through many battles, but it was rare for him to see such a strange environment. Ping saw Scene's doubts and said, in 100 actual combats, as long as there is one such strange environment, you will remember it for life. And when you have experienced hundreds or thousands of actual combats, you will want to experience all the strange environments in advance. Well, no matter how much I say, it is better to actually do it once. Are you ready? As a result, before Scene could answer, Ping had already taken the first step. This time, it was Ping's metal prosthesis that took the lead. With the elbow joint as the axis and the electromagnetic force as the drive, Ping threw a heavy and powerful swing punch. Scene certainly would not block it with his flesh and blood body, and immediately stepped back 2 steps to dodge. Ping followed closely behind him, and the arc-swept mechanical arm attacked left and right, forcing Scene into a state of panic. During the entrance test that day, Scene had used a brilliant joint technique to dismantle Ping's mechanical arm worth 50,000 yuan, but at this time Ping obviously realized Scene's strength, and each punch was quick and steady, not giving his opponent any chance to take advantage. The narrow environment in the training ground also made it difficult for Scene to find space to entangle Ping, so he could only retreat step by step. After 3 or 2 moves, Scene found that he had been forced to retreat deep into the training ground by Ping, and the obstacles around him began to hinder his movements. TSK. Scene took a step to the side, and before his foot landed, he felt a pain in his toes. It turned out that there was a square piece of solid metal on the floor under his feet. Scene's step directly hit his fragile little toe on the metal, and he almost broke out in a cold sweat. The instinctive reaction brought by the intense pain made Scene's evasive reaction a little slower, and Ping's heavy punch just hit Scene's nose at this moment. The special smell of high voltage electricity penetrating the air was already clearly audible. Scene shrugged helplessly. I lose, but here, your geographical advantage is too great, isn't it? Ping said, the terrain here is controlled by computers. Every time I come here, there will be earth-shaking changes, so my geographical advantage is not that big. Of course, I have trained here for several years, and my adaptability to unfamiliar environments is indeed stronger than yours. So, are you ready for another try? Scene exhaled lightly and said, of course. However, Scene lost even faster in the second round of competition, because he realized that the environment was extremely complex and would have a great impact on the battle. Scene's attention would inevitably be distracted by the environment. As a result, he was directly shaken by Ping's fake move and tripped to the ground. The solid metal on the ground almost hit Scene's back of the head. Ping reached out and pulled Scene up from the ground and asked, do you feel particularly uncomfortable? Scene nodded and shook his head. Although it was uncomfortable, Scene also realized the beauty of this training ground. This was actually similar to the training he received when he was a young apprentice. The young apprentice wearing a helmet to block his vision had to rely on the force to deal with the shooting of the training ball. This required the Jedi young apprentice to fully trust the guidance of the force and make correct judgments in time. Scene's initial training results were not ideal because his force sensitivity was far inferior to those of the best young apprentices in the temple. He could not dodge and block all the gunshots in an orderly manner under the guidance of the force like them almost as soon as he started. But as the training progressed, Scene's performance also improved steadily. By the time he was selected as an apprentice by Mostima, his performance was no less than those outstanding geniuses. Because Scene knew how to make up for his shortcomings, his force sensitivity was a shortcoming, so he used his excellent physical fitness, keen thinking ability, and a lot of practical experience to make up for it. He would accept various trainings more diligently than any other young apprentice, and would fully observe and record the movement trajectory of the training ball. When the guidance of the force was unclear, he would use his own thinking and muscle memory formed after a lot of practice to make up for the shortcomings. What he had to do now was no different. Scene needed to use all his strength to adapt to this highly complex training ground and deal with an opponent whose melee ability was better than his. The task was difficult, but the more difficult it was, the more interested Scene was. I'm ready. Let's start the third round. Ping was slightly surprised. You have a good mentality, then I won't be polite. As he spoke, Ping had already leaned forward and charged without hesitation, holding Scene's waist with a powerful grab, and then his thick thighs burst out with incredible strength, pushing the two forward. Not far behind SYN, there was a piece of metal bar piercing out horizontally. If he was hit, SYN would be in trouble for piercing his chest on the spot. But at the critical moment, SYN suddenly stretched out his hand to stab Anping's eyes, and at the same time, his knee suddenly hit Anping's lower abdomen. Anping was shocked. He never thought that SYN would really perform at the actual combat level in the actual battlefield. This kind of stunt of poking eyes and teasing the crotch is an absolute taboo in any formal fighting competition ring, and only in actual combat will there be no taboos. SYN looks young and gentle, but he didn't expect that this insidious trick would be so skillful. In desperation, Anping had to release his hands to block SYN's finger stabs and raised his knees to block SYN's knee strikes. SYN took this opportunity to break free from Anping's grasp, turned sideways, and just avoided the metal bar that was stabbed straight out. Then he stretched out his hand and pushed the metal bar, and with the help of the reverse thrust, he dodged to the side and rushed into a narrow passage. Anping was even more surprised. SYN, this kid, actually took the initiative to go deep into the training ground. Did he think he could adapt to the environment better than himself, the owner of the training ground? This kid is indeed extraordinary. With a hint of excitement, Anping immediately chased after him. However, just after taking a few steps into the passage, Anping was hit head on. It turned out that SYN was waiting in the passage, hiding in the shadows in the middle of the winding passage, holding a metal bar that he had broken off from somewhere, and stabbed it straight at Anping's face. Anping was ambushed, but he was not in a hurry, and directly grasped the metal bar in his hand with his prosthetic limb. At this moment, SYN loosened the metal bar as expected, and took advantage of the moment when Anping's prosthetic limb was against his chest and could not be stretched, and pounced on him, pushing Anping's center of gravity to lose stability and fall backwards. On the ground of the passage, there were several concave metal blocks that served as obstacles. Their edges were sharp and the tops were pointed, making them excellent toe killers. If you fall from them, I'm afraid all your internal organs will be injured. At the critical moment, Anping roared, and his legs suddenly swelled up, bursting out incredible strength, and together with the steel-like abdominal muscles hidden under the white robe, he firmly fixed his body. SYN's full-strength attack was like hitting a steel plate. Not only did it not shake Anping, but it was also thrown back and staggered. Anping did not miss the opportunity, and pointed the metal bar in his hand forward, just hanging in front of SYN. The third round of competition ended with Anping's victory again, but Anping did not feel happy about the victory. Instead, he felt a little sweat on his forehead. Just now, he was just a little bit away from losing to SYN. Although there was indeed a component of carelessness and underestimation of the enemy, SYN's ability to adapt to the environment was still far beyond his expectations. After only 2 rounds, SYN had already learned to use the environment to attack his opponent. "Huh, you kid, you are making great progress." SYN smiled when he heard this. This was his favorite comment. As a person who enjoys the process, he always attaches more importance to improving himself. The brief confrontation just now was the result of SYN using all his strength to observe the environment, think about countermeasures, and put them into practice. Although he failed to win in the end, he was undoubtedly much closer to victory than before. As long as he tries again, he might have a chance. Oh, so active? Don't you want to take a break? Really? In fact, I recommend that you take a break. Okay, if you don't want to rest, then don't rest. Let's fight for the 4th round. Chapter 83, Running Out of Energy. When Zubo ran to the training room to have lunch with Anping and SYN out of boredom, the dull sound of fists and feet hitting each other continued to be heard in the training room. SYN and Anping's figures kept intersecting and colliding in the small space, and their movements were so fast that it was dazzling. The complex obstacles around them did not affect their rhythm at all, but instead turned into a boost from time to time, allowing them to perform all kinds of incredible movements. Not long after, accompanied by a violent metal collision sound, the battle finally came to a temporary end. Anping used his metal prosthesis to shake off the long stick in SYN's hand, which was made of local materials, and won the victory for an unknown number of rounds. Anping shook the still buzzing metal prosthesis, then reached out and pulled up SYN. who was numb all over and shook his head, saying, "No, no, that's not the way to use force. To guide the muscles, to explode with force beyond the normal level, you must coordinate with the rhythm of breathing. Speaking of which, the quality of your muscles is unusually high. You have so much strength before you learn any special force generating methods. Are you really a pure-blooded human?" Scene did not answer, but sighed with deep regret. He had clearly used the force to slightly strengthen his body, but he still couldn't overwhelm Anping, and was repeatedly defeated in the most direct force collision. This plain-looking, sleepy-eyed team leader really doesn't look like a pure-blooded human. However, after a morning of sparring, Scene also noticed Anping's trick of exerting force. He always cooperated with special breathing methods at critical moments to allow his muscles to perform beyond their normal level in an instant. Although this explosion only lasted for a moment, the key to victory also lay in a moment, and Anping could grasp every winning moment firmly in his hands. Scene felt that he had benefited a lot from the sparring this morning. In this complex training ground, he was much more comfortable than at the beginning, but facing Anping was still far from enough. The opponent was like an insurmountable mountain, always able to beat Scene just right. However, Scene didn't care about the outcome of the sparring at all. What if he lost 100 times? As long as he could gain real experience every time he failed, it would be worth it. Moreover, as long as he won once, there would be a second, third, and many more times. "Captain, let's do it again." Anping's smile was numb. "Again? Don't you need to rest? There's no need to overwork yourself, right? You're on vacation." Scene, however, still maintained a sincere smile and said, "No, no, I'm not tired, let alone overworked. And I usually don't sit idle when I'm on vacation. I always do some training and study." Anping said, "I see, you're really a natural workaholic." Scene said, "Captain, you also jog during your vacation. I think we have something in common." As he spoke, Scene jumped up slightly, looking eager to try. Anping said, "I really don't have anything in common with you." Before he finished speaking, Scene had already taken a step forward and took the initiative to attack. At this moment, Zubo, who was at the door of the training room, finally couldn't stand it anymore and coughed heavily, interrupting Scene's high spirits. "I say, you two, stop it, it's time for lunch." Scene glanced at Zubo and said, "It's okay, I don't want to eat." Zubo said angrily, "If you don't want to eat, we will. Lunan has been waiting for you in the kitchen for a long time." Scene was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Anping sighed and explained, "During the team's vacation, the logistics personnel in the base will generally take holidays as well, so we have to be self-reliant for 3 meals a day. According to the duty roster, it is indeed my turn to take you and Lunan to cook today." Scene asked, "Where are the canned food?" Zubo said angrily, "We finished it a long time ago. And when Lunan is cooking, who dares to suggest eating canned food?" Scene thought of Lunan's passionate and unquestionable dishes before, and suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Zubo sneered, "Got it? So if you don't want to get food poisoning, go to the kitchen and help out." Scene nodded, "I understand, leave it to me." After Scene left, Zubo looked at Anping with a gloating look on his face. "Captain, are you happy?" Anping looked at Zubo indifferently for a long time. His body shook slightly, and blood spurted out of his mouth. Zubo then put away his expression and hurriedly stepped forward and stretched out his hand to Anping's wrist, feeling his disordered pulse, and then took a breath. "Captain, do you want to collect the pension? Are you working so hard?" Anping said dimly, "If you don't work hard, you will lose. This kid is really weird. His progress is unbelievable, even more exaggerated than Xiaoxiang at the beginning. I thought I could at least suppress him in this training ground for a month or two, but he almost capsized in this morning." Zubo scolded, "The amount of training you have done this morning is equivalent to 3 months of normal training. Do you really think you are a teenager as hot-blooded as Scene? Did you think of Xiaoxiang when you saw him?" Anping's face was gloomy, but he nodded and admitted, "Didn't you think of Xiaoxiang too? That kid is more talented than me, and his brain is more flexible than mine. If he had undergone more formal training, if the foundation in his early years could be laid more solid. Now seeing Scene, how can people not think of Xiaoxiang? You are already old, it's time to let it go." Aren't you afraid of death from overwork by working so hard? And Ping forced a smile. Don't we have a miracle doctor like you in the base? Bah. Have you ever seen a miracle doctor who has aged like this at the age of 37? He still takes care of you bunch of troublesome people every day. Every time I treat your injuries, it feels like I shorten my life. Zubo cursed while counting on his fingers, then took out a few black pills from the medicine box and stuffed them into Anping's mouth. After Anping swallowed the pill, he breathed a sigh of relief, then smiled and changed the subject. In the holographic advertising programs of those third-rate pharmaceutical companies, there is always an old expert who looks like you and is responsible for selling medicine. Those are all fake drugs. Captain, you actually compare me with those quacks? And Ping said, okay, don't just talk about me, you'd better make preparations. According to the task assigned by Boss Lee, during the 2-week vacation, we have to completely transform this kid. Your teaching task will not be easy. What's not easy? Zubo disagreed. I'll just throw a few sets of my herbal notes to him and ask him to recite them by heart. He won't have to do anything else during the 2-week vacation. You should worry about yourself. I think he is very interested in you. I'm afraid he has no intention of reading my medical books. And Ping was quite proud. This is the essence of my life's hard work, based on the long-standing Kyankan fighting technique. It is natural for him to be interested. Are you still proud? Spit out my pills if you can. And Ping's temper suddenly faded a bit, and he said, it's okay, it's Lunan's turn to teach in the afternoon, let her worry about it first. Chapter 84 Rapid Fire. And Ping's wish was good, but unfortunately, Lunan was already having a headache in the kitchen. What do you want to say? The woman asked impatiently. You ask me about the source of spices, and stop me from mixing the sauce. Scene showed the holographic book recipe in his hand and said, I mean, Deputy Captain, if you don't know how to cook, don't force yourself. I can teach you. Lunan heard this, and immediately felt a boiling anger surge in his heart. The blood vessels near his temples were impacted by the rapidly flowing blood, causing a dull pain. You said, I can't cook. With a deep breath, Lunan's voice sounded cold and distant, and the murderous intent in it frightened a free-range chicken in the kitchen that was waiting to be slaughtered and huddled deep in the cage. Scene was fearless and nodded seriously. After tasting it myself, and watching you cook the soup just now, I can conclude with certainty that you, the deputy captain, really know nothing about cooking, and have no talent at all. It is better to say that you are not good at making poison. Scene's harsh words were not finished yet, and Lunan had already taken action without hesitation. This taller woman, who was taller than Anping, shook her left arm and punched Scene in the face. However, Scene had just experienced the baptism of Anping and was most sensitive to close combat. Seeing this, he was not in a hurry and reached out to wrap his hand around Lunan's left wrist. But at this moment, Scene caught a glimpse of Lunan's right hand hanging at her waist and lightly buckled it on her belt. Scene let go of Lunan's wrist without hesitation and dodged to the side. A red energy beam brushed his shoulder and shot towards the ceiling of the kitchen, burning a scorch mark on the metal plate. Scene glanced at her and was immediately convinced Lunan actually fired a gun. Question mark? That's right, she is the team's firepower, not a close combat attacker, so she doesn't need to use her fists when she can draw a gun. But this is not on the battlefield. Deputy Captain, calm down. I will slowly calm down after you lie down, Lunan said in a very calm tone, while her right hand kept pulling out a gun and firing rapidly, making the kitchen full of sparks and a mess. At this time, Scene was particularly fortunate that the rigorous training he had experienced as a young apprentice was not in vain. As a GD young apprentice, even with a special helmet to blind his eyes and ears, he could dodge the energy beams emitted by the remote control training ball under the guidance of the Force. What's more, he is now a disciple of a GD master, and his skills are far better than those in his childhood. The only problem is that Lunan's shooting skills are much more tricky than the remote control training ball at the beginning. The firepower is much more powerful than the training ball. Scene was almost immediately forced into a panic, and had to use the limited furniture and facilities in the kitchen as cover, to avoid the sharp edge. Lunan seemed to be really angry. While she was shooting, she carefully chose the shooting position, which could not only reduce Scene's evasive space, but also prevent Scene from getting close to her. Scene only dodged a few times, and felt that his space for maneuver was getting smaller and smaller. It was only a matter of time before he was shot. At this time, Scene had to sigh that Lunan seemed to be rough, but in essence, she was undoubtedly rough but meticulous. Even in anger, she did everything impeccable in all the details related to the battle. It was a pity that this skill was used by her to target a frank and outspoken teammate. Scene hid behind a stove, thinking about it in his mind, trying to find a way out of the predicament. He picked up a table knife that fell on the ground lightly, and then calculated Lunan's position, considering using a parabola to interfere with the other party. As a result, before the thought was finished, a round metal bowl came in front of him in a beautiful parabola. Scene, who was well informed and had a strong sense of memory, recognized at a glance that it was a flash bomb made by Lunan. What the hell? At the same time, a strong light burst out. As an extraordinary firepower expert, Lunan's grasp of time is exquisite. The flash bomb did not delay at all and exploded directly in front of Scene during the falling process. The impact of strong light and strong shock is enough to make any normal person lose the ability to resist on the spot. After throwing the flash bomb, Lunan stepped closer cautiously. As the position and perspective moved, Lunan soon saw one of Scene's legs exposed. She raised her pistol, hesitated for a moment, and finally did not shoot again. However, when Lunan went around to the front, she pulled the trigger without hesitation. Because Scene, who should have been unconscious, was like a hunter lying in ambush next to a trap, waiting for Lunan to deliver himself. The moment Lunan came around, Scene threw the dinner knife in his hand and stabbed it directly at Lunan's hand holding the gun. In an instant, Lunan fired 2 shots in a row. The knife thrown by Scene was shot down in the air, and the other shot landed on the stove close to Scene's shoulder. Thanks to Scene's quick avoidance, otherwise it would have landed on his chest. But Scene dodged once, but not the second time. When Lunan pointed the pistol at Scene again, he had no room to move and could only raise his hands in surrender. Deputy Captain, I admit defeat. Calm down. Lunan did calm down a bit. In fact, when Scene threw the flying knife, she even broke out in cold sweat on her back. At this time, looking at Scene who raised his hands in surrender, Lunan found that her original boiling anger had dissipated unconsciously. So she stopped pestering him, took back the pistol, and reached out to pull Scene up from the ground. Sorry, I was just angry. After hearing this, Scene finally breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay, I should have expected this outcome. What do you mean by that? Lunan raised his eyebrows, feeling that the anger was about to return to his heart. But Scene wisely changed the subject. Deputy Captain, do you have any tricks for your rapid shooting? The accuracy is really amazing. Lunan snorted. Isn't it ironic? No matter how accurate it is, you still dodged it? And you threw the flying knife with your eyes closed, and it was not much worse than my rapid shooting. Scene smiled and said, after all, I was calculating without intention. I thought the flying knife would hit the target, but I didn't expect your interception to be so accurate. It's not difficult. As long as you react in time, you can make sure that the flying object hits the target with muscle memory. Of course, you have to spend a little more time and effort in training, and you also need to pay attention to a little talent. As Lunan said, his attention gradually turned to the explanation of shooting techniques, and the anger just now seemed to be just an illusion. After spending some time explaining the trick of rapid shooting, Lunan also raised his own question. You were hit by my flashbang just now, and you were lying on the ground pretending to be dead. Aren't you afraid that I will shoot you in the leg directly? Scene said, I have considered it, but it will only hurt for a while, and it is completely bearable. After all, your gun has no actual killing power, right, Deputy Captain? Lunan touched the gun handle in surprise. Can you see it? Well, I can see it from the first shot you fired. The scorch marks on the ceiling are much thinner than those left by conventional blasters. Moreover, I believe that the Deputy Captain will not really take a lethal weapon and aim it at his own family. Lunan smiled. That's true. Scene frowned, feeling that this sentence sounded a little weak, and he didn't know if it was an illusion. At this moment, Zubo's exclamation came from the kitchen door. Damn, Lunan, what are you going crazy about again? Syn is still a child. Do you understand the principle of children's words? And do you expect him to be like the captain's liquor and let you open holes in his body without regrets? Zubo's heartfelt words made Lunan, who had already calmed down, feel the taste of anger again. But the team's genius doctor was still ignorant of life and death, stomping his feet in front of the door and said, Lunan, I'm not saying anything bad about you, but how long are you going to remember what happened back then? Zion would probably cry when he sees you like this. And I'll tell you frankly, you really can't cook. Except for Zion, the child who lost his sense of taste due to drug poisoning. No one else can stand your cooking skills. Lunan was silent for a while and directly chose to pull out his gun and shoot. This time, of course, it didn't miss. The atmosphere in the restaurant was awkward and cold. Everyone was silently picking up the simple canned meals without the happiness that should be felt when enjoying delicious food. In the huge space, only the monotonous sound of tableaux colliding and Zubo's slight groan echoed. The 37-year-old old doctor covered his chest with his hand and kept moaning. Although the place where Lunan shot him not long ago was not actually injured, it was really painful. But apart from moaning, Zubo really didn't dare to stand up and protest. As the saying goes, you will suffer for your own evil, and Zubo also deeply understands this truth. The name Zion is a taboo within the team. It directly affects the psychological trauma of the captain and the deputy captain. For Lunan, it is particularly serious. And Ping was careless before and violated this taboo. As a result, Lunan shot him in the chest. Fortunately, the incident happened inside the base and the rescue was timely enough, so it did not lead to a greater tragedy. Although Lunan herself felt deep regret afterwards, the psychological trauma would not disappear. If someone dared to violate the taboo in front of her, she would still choose to shoot without hesitation. That's why she replaced the regular guns in the base with low lethal training guns. Just as the awkward lunch was coming to an end, someone suddenly broke the silence. Syn put down the can and asked, who is Zion? Chapter 85, Deja Vu. Syn successfully ignited the panic of the entire team with one sentence. Zubo reacted the fastest. With a strange cry, he turned over from his seat and ran away. He turned out of the restaurant with a speed that was completely unbelievable for a 73-year-old. He carefully used a small mirror to explore the situation in the restaurant. Although Ping stayed in the same place, his muscles were tense, as if the fuse of explosives was lit and could explode at any time. Zhuang Yuanying looked around, picked up the can, and left the restaurant very consciously, hiding with Zubo. The source of panic, Lunan, sat there calmly, not annoyed by the mention of taboos. Instead, she looked around with amusement and sneered, do you think I'm a lunatic who can get sick at any time? Ping immediately smiled flatteringly, no, I'm just worried about you. Lunan looked at Ping for a while with a half smile, restrained his smile, sighed and said, don't worry, I'm not that fragile. Outside the restaurant, Zubo couldn't help but sneer softly. This woman lead without blinking. The mess in the kitchen after she made a scene has not been cleaned up yet, and she has the nerve to say that she is not that fragile? Exclamation mark. However, the next moment, Lunan's performance made him stare in surprise. This is not a problem you need to worry about. Damn. Outside the restaurant, Zubo cursed in disbelief. Did she take the wrong medicine? As soon as the voice fell, Lunan's sharp eyes pierced straight over, relying on the reflection of the small mirror, and met Zubo's eyes. Zubo immediately felt the murderous intent coming, and quickly shut his mouth, and watched the show at ease. But no matter what, Lunan's reaction was indeed too abnormal. The word Zion has always been a taboo in the past few years. No matter how many ways the people around her tried to persuade her, the result would only get worse. Lunan's calmness and frankness at this time were really like the calm before the storm. Syn did not have this sense of crisis. In his opinion, Lunan had already calmed down and could have a frank conversation. So after hearing Lunan's answer, he continued to ask, I thought the team members could be more frank with each other. Lunan immediately sneered habitually, frank? You are also embarrassed to say frank. Then, what is your relationship with the survivors in the DUI 9527 manner? Why did Bosley help you collect relevant intelligence? Where are you from? And what are you doing in the Kyan star system? A series of questions made Scene silent. It's not that he couldn't say it, but for a while he didn't even know where to start, and the tacit understanding reached with Liu also made it impossible for Scene to choose to be frank. The silence for a moment also made Scene lose the opportunity to continue asking questions. Lunan patted the can with the spoon. Okay, let's eat. After dinner, I will teach you how to shoot quickly. You have a good foundation. With my guidance, you should be able to learn quickly. Zubo carefully returned to the table and reminded Scene. What she meant was that if you don't learn quickly enough, it means that your attitude is wrong. Be careful that she will be rude to you. Lunan glanced at Zubo, but did not deny it. Scene didn't care about it at all. He was eager for any opportunity to learn. Besides, Lunan's rapid shooting really amazed him. How could her attitude be wrong? Lunan would not have the opportunity to be rude. Lunan smiled slightly. Good attitude. I hope you can keep it later. After Lunan and Scene finished picking up the cans and left the restaurant for the training ground, the atmosphere in the restaurant was completely calm. Zubo let out a long breath, covered his chest with his hands and said, I thought a civil war was going to start again. We were ready to rescue her, but she actually held back. And Ping scraped the mincemeat out of the can and said thoughtfully, her attitude is indeed a bit abnormal. She didn't shoot when someone mentioned Zio to her face. Before, even we old friends didn't dare to mention it. Zubo was hesitant to speak. And Ping urged, if you have something to say, just say it. There are no outsiders here. Zio Zhuang was a little overwhelmed, but finally gritted his teeth and left the restaurant with the can he had just eaten half of. So there were really only 2 people who knew the situation left in the restaurant. Zubo then spoke quietly, Captain, think rationally. Can Scene be the same as us? And Ping said, of course not. How long has he joined? And he has so many secrets. No, you are wrong to think so. Zubo interrupted, I mean, how good looking is that kid? How good looking are the 2 of us? Add them together. Forget it. The 2 of us added together will only turn from 1 pile of shit into 2 piles of shit. Damn it. And Ping could only swear in response to such naked truth, but he was unwilling to accept it after all. Lunan never judges people by their appearance. Zubo said, the problem is that the kid is not only good looking, but also has good skills. How many years have we not seen a newcomer who can keep up with the rhythm of the whole team in the first mission? What's more, his performance is definitely not just keeping up with the rhythm. It is no problem to give him the MVP award in the last mission. This kind of handsome and talented young man has always been called the housewife killer. And Ping's face suddenly became ugly. What do you mean? Zubo said, what I mean is that the deputy captain is probably thinking of Zio just like you. I didn't think so when that guy first came, but now the more I look at him, the more he looks like Zio. And Ping was stunned for a moment and said, they don't look alike at all. Zio is taller than Lunan, and Scene is at most of medium build. Zubo said, they are similar in spirit, equally omnipotent and straightforward. In the past, only Zioan would speak out about the deputy captain's various evil deeds. So when Zioan said that the deputy captain's cooking was delicious, she would believe it without a doubt, and even would not question it. And now, there is another person who dares to say bad things about her in front of her. How can people not think of Zioan? And Ping was silent for a long time, nodded and said, if Scene can really fill the gap left by Zioan, it would not be bad. It's more than good, it's the greatest kindness. I really don't want to be shot by the deputy captain again. That woman has been crazy for 10 years, it's time to calm down. But Captain, there is one thing I must remind you, no matter how much Scene looks like Zioan, he is not Zioan after all. And Ping was puzzled, are you talking nonsense? What I mean is, no matter how outstanding Zioan is, he is still the deputy captain's younger brother, and the 2 of them only have a sister-brother relationship. But Scene and the deputy captain have no blood relationship, plus he is young and handsome. The housewife killer I mentioned before is not a joke. And Ping's face suddenly darkened, and he was silent for a long time, before he reluctantly said, nonsense, how could Lunan? Zubo took a look at Ping's ugly face that refused to admit the reality and decided to fully perform his duties as a doctor, say things that patients don't want to hear. Captain, If you don't believe it, let's go to the training ground and see. Chapter 86. Don't let him go out. When Zubo brought the patient to the shooting range, he saw a scene that was not at all unexpected. Lunan hugged Scene from behind, holding Scene's wrists tightly with both hands, and corrected his movements. No, the posture is too stiff. I told you not to copy my movements. Our body proportions and force habits are different. We should find the posture that suits us best and the gun best. Scene tried to change his center of gravity, like this. It's still wrong. You are still imitating my way of exerting force. Try to relax a little more and follow your own feelings, Lunan said, patting Scene's waist and legs, and then laughed with a little surprise. You are indeed a young man. Your muscle elasticity is quite good. Seeing this, Zubo said dryly, Captain, it's not too late to withdraw now and pretend that you didn't see anything. Unping just spit and then poked Zubo's eyes with his middle finger. The actions of these two people naturally could not escape Lunan's eyes. She put Scene down, motioning for the latter to go for free training first, then came up to the two of them and asked sarcastically, Captain, are you here to inspect our work? Zubo said, to inspect the marriage and love issues of the Red Apricot Squad. Lunan said nothing. Her right hand dropped to her waist, as if she was going to display her rapid fire skills. After all, Zubo was an old teammate for many years, and he immediately jumped behind and pinged at an astonishing speed. Captain, the vice captain is furious because of what I said. And Ping wanted to smash this bastard's head with one punch, but seeing that Lunan had already cast a sharp gaze at him, he could only bite the bullet and said, don't listen to Zubo's nonsense. I just came to see the training situation on your side. How is Scene doing? Lunan sneered and responded, that kid has very solid basic skills and good talent. He is making rapid progress. I estimate that he will be able to master rapid shooting before dinner today. And Ping was surprised and raised his eyebrows. So fast? Lunan sneered at this surprise. With a famous teacher like me to guide them, if they still can't master the basic skills before dinner, then it can only be said that the apprentice is too stupid. So Ping and Zubo, the two stupid apprentices who were also taught by Lunan hand in hand, but failed to master the basic skills in a week, suddenly felt like they were hit directly in the face with a heavy punch and left in disgrace. In the training room, after Lunan sent away the two bored teammates, he put away his gun and turned his attention back to Scene. Seeing the young man's increasingly skilled and smooth movements, the woman couldn't help but have a bit more amusement on her face, thinking to herself, your basic conditions are really good and your progress is incredibly fast. But if your conditions are too good, it will expose your background. There are not many places in the entire galaxy that can shape a person's basic skills so solidly. The better you perform, the less you can hide your secrets. The little guy is still a little immature. While thinking, Lunan couldn't help but laugh at himself. But what does your secret have to do with me? Lunan's laughter caught Scene's attention. What's wrong? Lunan restrained his smile, stretched out his hand, and knocked on the wall beside him, making a crisp sound. You already have the energy to be distracted and care about what I'm laughing at. Your shooting skills have been practiced to perfection. For such unreasonable doubts, Scene had no choice but to shut up and honestly turn his attention back to the gun in his hand. After all, what was Lunan laughing about, and what did it have to do with him? Design training took up Scene's entire afternoon. When he came to the cafeteria with sore arms and had dinner with his teammates, he felt a heartfelt satisfaction, and the haze that had accumulated in his heart was swept away. This afternoon was extremely fruitful. Lunan's rapid fire skills were not actually very profound, but they were well honed and solid. How to choose and modify the right firearms, how to choose a reasonable shooting target at close range, how to make both hands burst out at the fastest speed at the first time, how to control the muzzle, to point to the right position. These steps were summed up step by Lunan after hundreds of battles. Each step was not amazing, but after several steps were superimposed, Lunan's amazing rapid fire skills were created. In addition, Lunan was very good at teaching people. Unlike her usual rough personality, Lunan was surprisingly meticulous when teaching people to learn skills. She could find every detail of Scene's omissions very accurately and tell him the correct way to correct them, so that in one afternoon, Scene felt that he had glimpsed the way and barely entered the door. Next, as long as he increased the amount of training, it would not take a few days for him to imitate Lunan's rapid fire skills. Such a harvest naturally satisfied the Jedi apprentice who was keen on learning, and also made him feel a little comforted in this situation, where his future was confused. And then, there was double happiness. Scene. Zubo said at the dining table, "If you have time in the evening, can you help me make some emergency ointment?" As soon as the voice fell, Zhuang Yuanying at the end of the dining table made a slight sound of surprise. "It's so late, and you still have to work overtime?" As the girl spoke, she lowered her head slightly and pulled down her hat slightly with her hand to cover her face, but through the shadow cast by the brim of the hat, Zhuang Yuanying's eyes still stayed on Scene. This new member of the team, who had just completed a full day of training, was exhausted at this time. Although Scene was happy in his heart, his physical strength had indeed reached the limit. He couldn't even hold the bowl and chopsticks steadily when eating. When he used a spoon to dig out the cans, his fingers were shaking, and his face was even more tired. In this state, Zubo actually asked him to work overtime. Was this 73-year-old doctor too unethical? Zubo sighed when he heard this. Sure enough, this world is all about looks. Scene can win Xiaoxiang's care by showing a little tiredness. In the past, this old teen doctor took banned drugs and burst into tears at the table. Xiaoxiang just silently took up his bowl and sat a little further away. The difference in treatment was so obvious. But there was no room for negotiation about working overtime at night. Zubo knocked on the table and said, "Xiaoxiang, don't worry, Scene is so handsome, he is definitely not afraid of being tired." This sentence obviously has no logic. What does being handsome have to do with being tired? But Zhuang Yuanying blushed when she heard this and dared not say anything more. Not long after, Zubo saw that Scene had finished the canned meat, and he didn't care about letting him digest it properly, so he took Scene to his pharmacy to prepare emergency ointment. Lunan, who stayed in the restaurant to enjoy dessert, sneered as usual. Zhuang, stop poking, you're about to poke through the can." Zhuang Yuanying, who was at the end of the table, suddenly realized that he had finished the can a long time ago and was now abusing the can wall with a spoon. After being exposed by Lunan, he was immediately ashamed. Lunan had no intention of teasing the other party's concern for Scene, but explained, "You are the only one in the team who doesn't know about this. When I wanted to inform you, you were still locked up in the workshop." To put it simply, Bosley has ordered that during this period of time, we must keep Scene in the base and not let him go out. Chapter 87 Study hard and ask questions. Upon hearing this, Zhuang Yuanying immediately looked up with a look of surprise. "Bosley? Why?" Lunan said, "Who knows? I didn't ask." And Ping said, "I didn't ask either, but I can probably guess." Recently, Bosley has been collecting news about the survivors of the DUI 9527 manor. Most of the time, there is no good result, and he doesn't want Scene to know. Zhuang Yuanying didn't say anything, but just looked at the captain with curiosity. And Ping continued to explain, "You should also know that Scene is not a local. He boarded Bosley's pirate ship during the DUI 9527 raid. At that time, there were still many people in the manor who did not escape, and there has been no news so far. I guess there are Scene's relatives and friends among them." Lunan also asked, "Girlfriend?" And Ping shrugged, "Who knows? We were not at the scene at the time, but most of them are close people of the same level. Otherwise, why would Scene stay in the Silver Knights? Is it because he owed Bosley 1 million? That guy obviously wants to use the Silver Intelligence Network to save people. After all, Bosley was one of the parties involved in the raid. In terms of relationship, we are the closest." Lunan asked curiously, "But I've never heard him mention it. He just didn't mention it to us. He must have a tacit understanding with Bosley. Bosley rarely cares so much about a member personally. He has so many things to do now, but he puts most of the affairs aside and specifically goes to get intelligence for that kid. He also specifically asks us to keep him in the base. This kind of thing is rare." Lunan was silent for a while, sneered, and said, "Now that you mention it, things are really interesting. Bosley has really not cared so much about anyone in all these years." Before he finished speaking, a burst of laughter came from outside the restaurant. "So being handsome is different. Bosley has been single for so many years, and he is unmoved by the beautiful women around him. It seems that we have found the truth, Zubo said as he walked into the restaurant, and then he saw the training gun in Lunan's hand, with the muzzle aimed at him. Damn, I was just saying it casually. It's not a taboo in our team to tell jokes that insult Bosley. You don't have to take it so seriously. Lunan put away his gun and asked, where is the mission assigned to you? Why did you come back alone? Zubo said, I taught him the prescription step by step and assigned a task to that guy. There is nothing else for me to do. 200 barrels of ointment are enough for him to prepare until tomorrow night. I won't stay with him all night. Zhuang Yuanying asked with concern, will he be exhausted? Zubo smiled and said, it's better if he is exhausted. Throw him into the medical cabin and let him sleep for 3 days and 3 nights, and we will save ourselves some trouble. It's really tiring to work with that guy. For a simple extraction step, he can give you 10 questions and 20 rational suggestions. As soon as these words came out, Anping also sighed. Obviously he felt the same way. After training and sparring with Xin for a whole morning, he was exhausted both physically and mentally. Compared with the physical trauma caused by the forced outburst, the endless questions from Xin after the sparring caused him even more serious psychological trauma. This whole afternoon, Anping was actually thinking about how to ask for leave the next day. If Zubo could really leave Xin in the medical cabin to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights, Anping would definitely raise a glass to celebrate. However, Anping didn't raise his glass after all. The next morning, Anping was enjoying the delicious breakfast prepared by Zhuang Yuanying in the restaurant while struggling with the muscle aches all over his body. Just when he was thinking about taking a good rest for a day, while Xin was being held back by Zubo, he heard a familiar and terrifying footsteps coming from outside the restaurant. The next moment, Xin walked in with an excited expression on his face. Zubo, who was sitting opposite Anping, was also distracted. The soup dumpling in his hand fell on the table, and then he cursed. What the hell are you doing here? Xin didn't care about this impoliteness, and asked excitedly, the first step has been completed, what should we do next? What do you mean the first step has been completed? 200 barrels of ointment, you have finished it? Impossible, even if you work all night, it's too late. Xin said, if it is purely handmade, it is indeed too late. However, I consider that preparing the ointment is purely physical work and there is no need for pure manual work. So I used the equipment and parts in the equipment warehouse next door to modify a temporary production line. Simple adding materials and timed stirring, cooling and extraction and other functions can be easily achieved. Before he finished speaking, Zubo jumped up. Temporary production line. Are you kidding me? As he spoke, Zubo had already rushed out of the restaurant in disbelief and ran quickly to the equipment warehouse next to the pharmacy. Not long after, he let out a scream that shocked most of the underground base. Fuck, are you serious? Xin stayed in the restaurant, looking at Anping eagerly, and his clear eyes made Anping feel creepy. Captain, it's time to learn the second lesson this morning, right? Anping cursed in his heart. If you continue to learn like this, the third lesson will be my funeral. But in front of the team members, how could Anping, as the captain, back down? He had to force his smile and said, okay, it's right to have this kind of enthusiasm. This morning, let's learn about the moral cultivation of warriors. Moral cultivation? Anping said earnestly, the martial arts of the Kyan star system emphasizes both internal and external cultivation. Simply improving martial arts is just an evil way. You must strengthen your own moral cultivation to achieve perfection and happiness, and let your heart be at peace with your inner and outer self. These words made Lunan sneer continuously. I don't know which novel Anping saw this nonsense from. Cultivating both internal and external cultivation, and being smooth and happy. If moral cultivation is really that useful, the pirate gangs in the Kyan star system should have gone crazy and died suddenly. It's obvious that your physical strength can't sustain continuous practical teaching, so you can just tell the truth. Why do you have to find such an outrageous excuse to cover yourself up? Can't everyone see it? Although Xin is young and a little immature, he is obviously not an idiot. How could he believe your nonsense? However, after Anping finished his nonsense, he saw Xin nodding vigorously, showing deep sympathy. Others may not agree with this internal and external cultivation theory, but SYN, as a GD apprentice, has received similar education since childhood, and the corresponding concept has long been deeply rooted. GD Knights control the most powerful force in the galaxy, but they are not born for force, but spend their whole lives pursuing the balance of the force. Compared with the word warrior, they are actually more like a group of devout seekers. Therefore, Ping's so-called internal and external cultivation theory, on the contrary, suits SYN's mind and makes him feel deeply identified. Well, force without moral restraint will only backfire. This concept is very valuable. I hope the captain can explain your understanding to me in detail. Damn. Lunan's sneer froze on his face, and when he heard SYN asking about the details of the so-called moral cultivation, Lunan couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. SYN, I really misjudged you. Chapter 88 Recycling. Ping's theory of cultivating both the inner and the outer is certainly a bit of nonsense, but when SYN pulls him to ask for advice with expectation, Ping can really tell you one profound truth after another. In fact, this sleepy middle-aged man has experienced many twists and turns in his life, and his understanding and experience of force and morality are far better than ordinary people. He has seen madmen who destroyed themselves due to overexpansion, and thieves who have committed many evil deeds, but are at large. He himself has also experienced confusion about force and morality. When he was young, he still had awe for etiquette and morality, but he was constantly in trouble, and fell into depravity. When he came to use hands, he did half black and half white things, and no longer respected secular etiquette, but lived a carefree life. Ping did not instill any conclusive concepts in SYN, but just told the stories of what he heard, saw, thought, so that SYN listened attentively and without distraction. After the storytelling session, SYN fell into deep thought alone, and stopped pestering Ping for actual combat training. This made the middle-aged man, whose muscles were still sore, feel relieved. A morning passed quietly, and after lunch, it was Lunan's turn to teach. After lunch, SYN showed Lunan an eager look. Deputy Captain, regarding yesterday's rapid fire technique, I had some new ideas when I assembled the ointment production line tonight. Please correct me. As he spoke, SYN pulled out his training gun and pierced through the 4 holographic targets around him in a lightning fast manner. Lunan looked tense, looking at the parts on the holographic target that were marked with discoloration due to the energy beam, and said nothing for a long time. SYN felt a little uneasy. He did not follow Lunan's instructions yesterday, but added a lot of his own innovations. He modified the training gun and the anticipation skills when aiming. As a result, the rapid shooting result was not very good. He fired 4 shots in a second, but only 1 shot hit the vital part of the holographic target accurately. The remaining 3 shots were more or less offset, and the most outrageous one almost missed the target. But this result had a completely different meaning in Lunan's eyes. From a professional perspective, SYN's progress in just 1 day was simply earth-shaking. Although judging from the results of the holographic target alone, the shooting accuracy seemed to be not as good as yesterday. But apart from the results, SYN's smoothness and ease in his movements were much better than yesterday's awkward imitation of others. He seemed to have entered the hall. As long as he practiced diligently, the speed and accuracy of shooting would naturally continue to improve. This was just a matter of accumulation. To be honest, Lunan had nothing to correct. Meeting an apprentice with such amazing comprehension is of course a teacher's luck, but on the other hand, it is also a source of pressure for a teacher. Especially when SYN looked up at Lunan expectantly, waiting for her further correction. Lunan felt tongue-tied and didn't know what to say to him. The deputy captain, who was used to sneering and mocking, had almost forgotten how to affirm others in terms of professional skills. After a long time, Lunan coughed and said, "It's okay, it's not impossible to practice in this direction." SYN immediately breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that this represented Lunan's high evaluation, and then said excitedly, "Then let's do actual combat." Lunan almost choked on his saliva. "Actual combat?" SYN said, "Nothing can help people improve better than actual combat training. Deputy Captain, please." When the young GD apprentice bowed his head to Lunan with a sincere attitude, the rebellious deputy captain couldn't even think of refusing for a while. This thought of kindness finally made Lunan regret it. That night, Zhuang Yuanying prepared dinner carefully, set the table full, and waited for the arrival of several teammates. However, Anping arrived, Zubo arrived, but Lunan, who was most used to eating on time, did not arrive. This is undoubtedly a rare thing in the Red Apricot team. Lunan is far more persistent than others on the issue of eating, and it can even be called a heart disease. Things that can make her miss dinner are usually earth-shattering. The girl was a little uneasy. Captain, nothing has happened recently, right? Anping sighed. When can there be no accidents in the wilderness? If you want to ask about Lunan's situation, you can ask directly. But about Lunan, I can only say that you'd better start preparing for class tonight. You will take over Lunan's class starting tomorrow. Zhuang Yuanying was puzzled. What's wrong with the deputy captain? Anping couldn't help but curled his lips and jokingly said, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with her? Before he finished speaking, a tired staggering footsteps came from outside the restaurant. The tall Lunan dragged her heavy steps to the restaurant, raised her eyebrows, and said hello to her teammates. When she sat down at the table, picked up the soup spoon, and prepared to drink a mouthful of hot soup to moisten her throat, she found that the spoon in her hand was shaking non-stop, and most of the spoonful of clear soup was immediately shaken onto the table. The next moment, Lunan raised her head, and saw that Anping and Zubo had turned their heads away from the table. One pretended to watch the holographic TV in the restaurant, and the other held a holographic book upside down, shaking his head. This attitude of trying to cover up the truth made Lunan furious, but unfortunately, she was extremely tired and couldn't get angry anyway, so she had to put down the soup spoon and stared at the two with murderous eyes. Anping was the first to be unable to bear the pressure and coughed. I'm full. I'm going to the toilet now. Zubo was speechless, deeply hating himself for hesitating for a moment, and the captain plagiarized the reason he had thought of. He really didn't have the courage to say in front of the deputy captain, I'm going to the toilet too, so he had to rack his brains to think of another reason. I'm going to treat Scene's injury. After saying this, Zubo admired his own intelligence, because this reason was upright and logical. Lunan had been practicing with Scene in actual combat all afternoon, and when it was time for dinner, this Iron Man-like deputy captain was so tired that he delayed the meal. It is conceivable that Scene, as the opponent of the practice, would be in a worse condition. At this time, he might be lying on the training ground dying. At this time, it would be unjust if the team doctor didn't take action. So, Zubo turned his back to Lunan's murderous gaze and quietly slipped out of the restaurant. When he arrived at Lunan's shooting training ground, he saw Scene, who was covered in wounds and collapsed on the ground, and smelled a faint aroma of barbecue in the air. The team doctor couldn't help but say, are you a born masochist? On weekdays, I would rather avoid the deputy captain, but you dare to take the initiative to meet her for actual combat. You are more dedicated than a holographic target to get burns from shooting with a training gun. As he spoke, Zubo began to apply Bacter ointment on Scene. For such a bad patient who likes to add to the workload of doctors, Zubo's actions were naturally not gentle. The patch was slapped with a loud sound, but Scene couldn't help laughing. This smile made Zubo shudder. He felt that among all the patients he had come into contact with in his life, this person was the most perverted. He could laugh, even when he was slapped hard on the burns. But Scene whispered, I won. Ah. Zubo was stunned when he heard this, and a patch was directly slapped on the ground. Scene finished speaking and closed his eyes. Although we only won a small game at the end, we won after all. Congratulations. Zubo put another piece of ointment on Scene's wound, and this time he put extra force, finally making Scene gasp in pain, and the joy in his heart disappeared. After a while, Scene finally stopped grinning, but lay on the ground and asked a question that made Zubo's hands tremble again. Zubo, are you hiding something from me? Zubo's scalp tingled slightly when he heard it, and he felt embarrassed, as if he had committed a crime and was caught in bed. Of course they were hiding something from him. Boss Lee personally ordered all members of the team to tie Scene up and not let him leave the base in the next few days. The reason behind this was naturally not to be told to Scene himself. Zubo didn't expect that this kid actually saw it. Thinking about it again, Zubo couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It would be strange if he didn't see it. Scene. Although he is conservative in many aspects and a little too kind-hearted, he is never stupid. In the previous operation on DUI 4399, Scene disagreed with the team's ruthless and cold-blooded style of doing things. His disgust was even beyond words, and the team members could see it. However, Scene was not stupid enough to argue with the team members on the scene, or to make a big fuss. Instead, he did his best to implement his ideas with a plan that everyone could accept. The dead cannot be resurrected, but Scene was able to find a way to convince others to return to the wasteland with a boatload of people who should have died. If Scene was not present, the team would never do this. Therefore, if someone underestimated Scene's mind, it would be foolish. So Zubo gave up on making up lies and just sighed. If we could tell, why would we hide it from you? Scene was stunned for a moment when he heard this and couldn't help laughing. That's right, then I won't ask. But I have always had a problem. That is, I can't suppress my curiosity. Zubo clicked his tongue when he heard this. You mean to threaten us? If we don't teach you all your unique skills in the next few days, you will run away desperately to satisfy your curiosity, right? As he spoke, Zubo forcefully put a piece of medicine patch on Scene's wound, causing the latter's smile to freeze slightly. After a while, Scene endured the pain and asked, Uncle Zu, I have already applied a patch on this wound. Uncle Zu held up another piece of ointment. Do you want me to apply it again? After that, Uncle Zu chuckled and said, you kid, you have become more slick than when we first met, but it's better to be a little slick. The current star system is not a place where a gentleman can survive with dignity. Well, with your physical condition you probably can't do anything tonight, so just read some medical books with me. If you want to be a good doctor in the Red Apricot team, you can't rely solely on mainstream medical skills. Scene asked with interest. I also noticed that the team seems to be in serious shortage of conventional medical supplies, so they have to use various local herbs to replace them. Is there any reason for this? Zubo replied, the biggest reason is the blockade of materials. After all, we are not a formal organization. We can't build so many factories on this desolate land. Many materials can only rely on trade imports. But you can imagine that not all merchants are willing to deal with us, and not all goods can be circulated smoothly. Scene listened attentively. Are medical supplies a special taboo? I don't think the Silver Knights are short of other materials. Lack of everything. How can there be no shortage of materials? From food to energy, from mechanical parts to electronic equipment, the Silver Knights are short of everything. Zubo sighed. It's just that Bosley is so powerful that he has filled most of the gaps, which makes the organization seem prosperous and rich in materials. But Bosley is not omnipotent after all. There are some gaps that cannot be filled, and medical resources are one of them. If you were outside the Red Apricot squad, you wanted to use Bacter ointment as a tattoo sticker so luxuriously, that would be a foolish dream. Scene was also shocked when he heard it. Since resources are precious, don't waste them on me. Zubo said, it's okay. These are recycled and have little effect. Even Scene couldn't help but swear. Bacter ointment can be recycled? Where did this folk remedy come from? If I can't find it in the medical books later, this matter will not end. Zubo will have to wait for the lunchbox made by Lunan in the next few days. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 New Courses. Scene's second day in the underground base was fulfilling and enjoyable. Although he had broken bones and muscles in the morning fight with Anping, and had burns all over his body in the afternoon fight with Lunan, and was poisoned at night. While learning herbal knowledge, he had vomiting and diarrhea all night. But for Scene, the little suffering he experienced physically was insignificant, and the knowledge and skills he learned were precious. Anping's fighting skills, Lunan's gun skills, Zubo's herbal knowledge and first aid skills, all opened his eyes. These things may not be better than what he saw and learned in the temple, but they condense the countless efforts and ingenuity of the team members. For Scene, it was enough to expand his horizons and improve his strength in all aspects. In this situation, nothing is more important than personal strength. Sin thought more than once, if he could be stronger when the manor was attacked and could help his master more, would the subsequent development be different? Would those innocent people who died tragically have a chance to survive? Of course, Sin was not so far immersed in meaningless regret, but his previous experience did make him feel deeply about his own shortcomings. So on the morning of the third day, Sin got up early, endured the severe pain all over his body, and went to the restaurant to prepare breakfast for several teammates. According to the rotation table, he should not be responsible for today's 3 meals, but Sin was willing to put on a diligent attitude in exchange for the unreserved teaching and learning of several temporary instructors. Sin made breakfast very carefully. Although the kitchen was cold and limited in ingredients, and there were quite a few agricultural products from the Kyangsing system that he was not familiar with, Sin relied on his enthusiasm and outstanding skills to serve a table full of delicacies to his teammates. He was waiting in front of the restaurant in a neat white coat. However, when it was time for dinner, the teammates who were supposed to arrive one after another were late, and even Lunan, who was always punctual, was nowhere to be seen. In the end, only Zhuang Yuanying appeared timidly at the door of the restaurant, but hesitated. Zhuang Yuanying tried to ignore Sin, who was welcoming guests at the door, and looked at the empty restaurant. After hesitating for a while, she finally pulled down her bonnet and turned to leave. Sin had worked hard the whole morning just to wait for such a diner, so of course he couldn't let her leave. He hurriedly went up to her and grabbed her hand. "Why are you running?" The girl's face flushed, and the temperature from her hand gradually increased. Only her voice was still weak. I still have work to do," Sin hurriedly advised. "No matter how big the work is, it won't interfere with your 3 meals a day. I specially made your favorite nightlight grass soup rice today. It's not too late to get busy with work after eating it." Zhuang Yuanying felt even more shy when she heard such caring and sincere words, and she couldn't help but speed up her pace to escape the scene. She originally planned to keep her preference for food as a secret that no one knew, but Sin's insight was too amazing. He actually saw her preferences in just a few days and knew her better than his teammates who had known her for many years. But Sin held on tightly. Even if the girl shook her hands vigorously, she couldn't get rid of the Jedi apprentice who strengthened his body with a force. Finally, she lost her temper and whispered, "Well, okay." Sin was relieved and let go of Zhuang Yuanying's hand, which had been numb and powerless. Looking back, he saw that he was dragged by Zhuang Yuanying all the way, leaving 2 lines of marks on the ground, caused by the friction between the soles of his shoes and the floor. He had a new understanding of the brute force of this young mechanic. This kind of strength is just like a large engineering robot, which is completely contrary to basic human common sense. Zhuang Yuanying's inhuman identity is further confirmed. "I just don't know what kind of creature is this girl who looks like a human, speaks like a human, and even has the same eating habits as humans, but has inhuman strength?" After the slightly awkward breakfast time, Sin still couldn't wait for Enping and others, and he couldn't help but be disappointed. But at this moment, the timid and shy girl said softly, "Well, I'm the one who teaches this morning." Sin was shocked. "You?" Zhuang Yuanying was also startled, and her whole body huddled up. "Yes, sorry." Sin felt that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this subconscious apology. At the same time, he secretly reminded himself that he must be careful when facing Zhuang Yuanying in the future, otherwise it would be too easy to disturb this little animal. But in any case, Zhuang Yuanying's willingness to serve as a temporary instructor was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise for Sin. Among the 4 teammates of the Red Apricot team, Zhuang Yuanying's skills were the most enviable. Or in other words, what Sin needed most now was Zhuang Yuanying's skills. Because what he was going to do next required absolutely superb mechanical repair technology and sufficient mechanical repair experience, and all of this could only be done by Zhuang Yuanying. Sin was still considering how to make that overly shy teammate willing to share knowledge, but now the knowledge was actually delivered to his door. After trying to appease Zhuang Yuanying, Sin followed her to the deepest part of the underground of the Kyangsing base. Looking out, there was a large open square. There was a heavy round metal gate on the ground in the center. With the arrival of Zhuang Yuanying, The gate slowly closed around, revealing a long passage that stretched downward to an unknown end, and a fully armed lift. When Sin saw the ferocious lift, he was shocked. He followed his master to travel around the Milky Way, and was barely knowledgeable, but it was the first time he saw someone pile up so many weapons and equipment on his own lift. The lift, which can accommodate up to 20 people, was equipped with 2 automatic turrets, a flamethrower tower and a missile launcher, which directly occupied more than half of the space, and made the lift almost overweight, and kept making harsh groans when moving up and down. Sin followed Zhuang Yuanying to stand on the platform, and descended deep underground in the rumble, and his heart was uneasy as the platform trembled. Seeing the passageway below him was extremely deep, Sin couldn't help but imagine the scene of the lift disintegrating in midair and the two falling into the abyss. However, when he glanced at Zhuang Yuanying, he was surprised to find that she was leaning against the flamethrower, subconsciously stroking the dark flame mouth with her palm. Instead of showing a nervous and fearful expression on her face, she felt extremely at ease, as if the automatic weapons around her could bring her a great sense of security. Sin seemed to have realized something, and couldn't help but think of the previous missions, when Zhuang Yuanying always hid in the spacecraft, and refused to go out. At that time, and Ping and others explained that someone must stay behind to watch the house during the missions, but the actual situation was probably that Zhuang Yuanying had a serious fear of the outside world. Generally speaking, this kind of psychological problem comes from some miserable and dark past. Thinking of this, Sin made up his mind, in the future, when getting along with Zhuang Yuanying, he must be careful again and again and not touch each other's scars. This time, in order to ask Zhuang Yuanying about the mechanical repair technology, he should just talk about the matter, and not talk about other topics easily. After a while, the lift finally landed the two of them at the end of the passage, which was also the bottom of the underground base. As the sealed gate opened, a gust of slightly biting cold wind blew in, causing Sin to shudder. Is it so eerie? What on earth is hidden in this underground base? Chapter 90 Skydome 3. After passing the gate, Sin heard a loud clanging sound, as if heavy metal parts were colliding violently. In addition, there were various sounds such as gears running, engines humming, and flames burning, like a noisy band. Judging from the sound, there was an entire factory hidden at the bottom of the base, and the owner of the factory was undoubtedly Zhuang Yuanying. The deeper Sin went, the more surprised he was about this girl with horns. He had been in the Red Apricot base for some time, and naturally checked the 3-dimensional map of the base, but the map only showed the part above the long passage. As for the part below, it was classified as top secret, and Sin could not see it with his authority. Now it seems that the weight of this top secret is really not light, not only about this base, but also about the deep secrets of the Red Apricot Squad and even the Silver Knights. But now is not the time to explore secrets. There are countless secrets in the Milky Way. If Sin explores them one by one, it will not be enough for him to live another 800 years. So there was only one thing he had to do now. Today, I will demonstrate how to repair the Skydome 3rd engine. Zhuang Yuanying took Sin to a spotless white processing workshop, and set to a spaceship engine placed in the middle. Skydome 3rd is a universal engine designed and finalized by B Industries 700 years ago. It can be easily assembled into a variety of spaceships. Although there are naturally various defects in the design, it is cheap, has strong production capacity, and sufficient performance. Therefore, in the following 700 years, even after several versions, Skydome 3rd has always been the most common spaceship engine in the Kyan galaxy. Sin nodded vigorously. He had gradually mastered these common sense through various channels during this period. But the same knowledge, spoken by Zhuang Yuanying, a senior mechanic, is naturally more credible. Among the various types of spaceships of the Silver Knights, more than half are equipped with the Skydome 3rd, of similar style, so mastering this type of engine is also a compulsory course for every mechanic in the Silver Knights. Zhuang Yuanying said as he walked onto the processing table in the workshop, controlled several mechanical arms, and began to dismantle the engine that was more than one person tall in front of him. The one sent to the workshop had obviously been used very roughly and not properly maintained. At this time, the whole body was charred, as if it had been burned by a fierce fire, and black smoke continued to emerge from the cracks. Half of the turbine blades at the jet nozzle were broken and bent. After it was disassembled, the internal scene was simply horrible. From Scene's point of view, this thing has little value for SQ. Instead of taking the trouble to repair it, it is better to contact the manufacturer directly to exchange it for a new one. Anyway, this Skydome 3rd is the most popular civilian style in the Kyan galaxy. Not only is it cheap, but the channels for obtaining it are also very wide. Even if there is a problem of material embargo in the wasteland, it will not be a problem for Skydome 3rd. But looking at Zhuang Yuanying's focused and even pious expression, Scene knew that for this young mechanical repair issues were never financial calculations. Even if it was not for the purpose of demonstrating technology, she would not let an engine that was still worth repairing be scrapped. With the dancing of the mechanical arm, this Skydome number 3 was disassembled into countless tiny components. Zhuang Yuanying explained the structural principles of the engine in a low voice, while classifying the disassembled components. The completely unrepairable waste was classified into one category. The ones that could continue to be used after processing were classified into another category, and the intact ones were the last category. In the girl's soft voice, the pile of components symbolizing waste was piled up higher and higher, which made Scene wonder. Zhuang Yuanying discarded at least 1/3 of the components. How would she repair it next? Even if there were sufficient component reserves in the underground base to replace all the waste, the entire engine was disassembled like this, and putting it back would inevitably affect the overall performance. Next, it's the core of today's course. For engines that are severely damaged, they can't be repaired according to conventional ideas. Zhuang Yuanying said, stopping her work for a while, and began to seriously prepare the explanation, but the girl's eyes were still focused on the workbench, not even looking at Scene. Scene didn't care. With Zhuang Yuanying's shy personality, this was probably the only way to make her speak fluently. Compared with Zhuang Yuanying's concern, he was more concerned about how the other party was going to repair this engine that was dismantled into scrap. The versatility of Skydome 3rd has always been well known, and this versatility does not only mean that it can be smoothly installed in many different types of spacecraft. More importantly, Skydome 3rd is the prototype of many similar engines. Therefore, under certain conditions, Skydome 3rd can be converted into other types of engines. Scene was dumbfounded when he heard this. "Are you kidding?" Exclamation mark. The engine is not a toy for assembly. Whether it is manufacturing or maintenance, it requires an absolutely precise environment. Can it be transformed temporarily? However, as Zhuang Yuanying's processing steps continued to advance, Scene was even more surprised to find that the tattered Skydome 3rd was actually changing into a brand new shape bit by bit. The originally slightly complicated turbine blades were cut and removed as a whole, and replaced with a set of grids made of special steel plates processed from the outer shell. The core reaction chamber was condensed by 1/3, which reduced the starting efficiency, but also enabled the engine to maintain normal operation. The charred and cracked outer shell was simply welded and filled, and then installed back, which looked a little shaky, but considering that the overall performance of the engine had declined, the outer shell did not need to provide such a strong fixing and heat dissipation function. After a series of operations, Skydome 3rd had changed beyond recognition, but it seemed to be radiating a new vitality. After all, Scene had accumulated considerable knowledge. After observing for a while, he determined that this engine carefully repaired by Zhuang Yuanying was a castrated modification based on the Skydome Wilderness model with the lowest configuration in the Skydome series, and theoretically it could operate normally. Although as a low-end model, the performance of Sky Wilderness is almost half of the original version, but it still has performance to speak of. Before the repair, Sky number 3 was just a scrap waiting to be scrapped. So far, Scene was just amazed. Zhuang Yuanying's skills were not so shocking, and she was even deliberately restraining her level. She did not use her own strange power and unique machine gun throughout the whole process. All operations use the most simple and unpretentious technology, and even the movements were very slow. It was as if she was saying, as long as you remember this process, anyone can do the same thing. Scene can do it too. Chapter 91 Resonance. As an absolutely focused and excellent student, Scene only watched the process once and memorized most of the key steps. Although some structural principles are still unclear, from a practical point of view, there will be no problem, even if he starts working now. After completing the modification, Zhuang Yuanying exhaled lightly, looking at the brand new Skydome Wilderness engine in front of her. Her heart surged with joy. For her, there is nothing happier than working as a mechanic. But even so, Zhuang Yuanying still didn't dare to turn around and look at Scene directly. For this newcomer who had just joined the team not long ago, Zhuang Yuanying still couldn't treat him calmly, like she treated Ping and others, and it was inevitable that she would be flustered after a long contact. So after calming down, she immediately moved the course to the next link. Next, I will demonstrate a modification method for Skydome number 3. As she spoke, Zhuang Yuanying controlled the conveyor belt on the processing table to transport the modified Skydome Wilderness to the warehouse, and then transferred another intact Skydome number 3 to the processing table. As the most versatile engine, Skydome 3rd has a very broad space for modification. Both the official and the private sectors have created countless wonderful modification plans. And what Zhuang Yuanying is going to demonstrate at this time is naturally not a simple method. Scene watched the girl's performance with full expectations. Zhuang Yuanying did not disappoint Scene. She used the limited tools on the processing table and only a few simple steps to make an ordinary engine like a reborn, lighting up an unusual light. However, looking at the steel machine in front of him, that was covered with patches, flames, and made sharp noises from time to time, Scene felt that he was facing a barrel of explosives with a lead fuse, and his heart could not help but rise and fall with the engine that bounced endlessly due to the runaway energy. This underground factory was built so deep, could it be, to prevent the big explosion from affecting the ground? Fortunately, Zhuang Yuanying came to teach, not to commit suicide bombing. After completing the initial modification, the girl's face was calm and her hands suddenly accelerated. She pushed the joystick on the processing table and quickly sent the engine, which was already throbbing, to an open laboratory. Through the monitor in the workshop, the picture in the open laboratory was clearly presented in front of the two. The temporarily repaired Skydome number 3 had begun to return to its original state amidst the continuous explosions. However, just before the engine completely disintegrated, Zhuang Yuanying used remote control to make the engine's jet port shine brightly. Around it, the 8 thick mechanical arms used to fix the engine and transmit energy to the inside immediately groaned in a twisted manner. From the data panel of the monitor, it can be clearly seen that this engine is releasing amazing power, which is more than one level better than the original version, and is not much worse than the latest flagship model of the Skydome series. But of course, this state cannot last long. After a while, the light of the engine nozzle began to weaken, and cracks began to appear on the surrounding shells, and sparks flew out of them. When the engine emitted thick black smoke and completely shut down, Scene couldn't help but let out a long sigh. What a wonderful lesson. Objectively speaking, the modification plan demonstrated by Zhuang Yuanying is not very sophisticated. Whether it is the tools used in the modification, the added materials, or the techniques used, they are essentially simple and unpretentious. Even this plan itself is probably not original, and it should have been circulated in the Kyan galaxy for a long time. But teaching is not the same as showing off skills, and not being sophisticated does not mean being impractical. The advantages of this modification plan are obvious at a glance. This is a means of saving lives and escaping. If you encounter any danger while riding a spaceship and need to speed up your escape, and the performance of the spaceship is insufficient, this plan can allow people to complete the escape using limited resources. Although the engine will be completely scrapped after escaping, it is much better than dying on the spot. Looking through the monitor at the charred engine due to overload, Scene couldn't help but feel familiar. It looked like a pair of brothers with the scrapped engine that was transformed into Skydome Wilderness. As expected, the next moment, Zhuang Yuanying said, "After that, you will transform it into Skydome Wilderness." Scene smiled and couldn't help rubbing his wrist. After witnessing 2 wonderful courses, he was also itching to do it. Learning to modify the machine must always be based on practical operation. After taking the joystick from Zhuang Yuanying, Xin took a deep breath and sorted out the modification plan he had just seen and thought of in his mind again. After confirming that it was roughly correct, he started to operate. Xin is not the kind of genius who can remember everything he sees, and although Zhuang Yuanying's demonstration steps seem simple and unpretentious, it is ultimately a comprehensive transformation of advanced industrial products. The entire process is complicated and lengthy. Xin is not sure that there will be no mistakes, so the operation process must be cautious. At the same time, when Xin pulled down the joystick, he had already prepared himself for the possibility of the transformation failing and the engine being scrapped. Anyway, he still owed millions of dollars, so he didn't care about the debt of one more engine. However, when he actually started, Xin found that the process was much smoother than he expected. His hands seemed to be guided by some invisible force, and he methodically copied the steps demonstrated by Zhuang Yuanying, and some blurred images were faintly flashing in front of his eyes. The skydome number 3 on the processing table seemed to overlap with the engine in another time and space. This strange phenomenon surprised Xin. Is this a revelation from the Force? Xin immediately calmed down and carefully felt the flow of the Force. Since entering the Khan galaxy, he felt that his connection with the Force has become closer and closer. Many things that he couldn't do or see before seem to be actually touched now. Although this change is very slow, it is undoubtedly advancing steadily step by step. However, at this moment, Xin suddenly felt a strong disturbance coming, as if an outsider had been mixed into the fusion of himself and the Force. The sudden disturbance shattered the blurred picture in Xin's mind. The next moment, he heard a rapid and heavy gasp, as if a wounded beast was grunting and roaring. Xin turned his head quickly and saw that the girl who was supposed to be supervising the transformation work had already knelt on the ground. Her petite body rose and fell with the sound of breathing, as if something huge was about to break out of her shell. This strange scene shocked Xin, and he didn't care to think about the reason for the change. He hurriedly stepped forward and wanted to help Zhuang Yuanying up and check her condition, but just after taking a step, the other party seemed to be strongly stimulated and curled up with her hands and feet. Xin stopped immediately and no longer moved forward because Zhuang Yuanying's condition at this time was too abnormal. With strong breathing, Zhuang Yuanying's body was covered with cold sweat like a spring, and her clothes were soaked in an instant. And the soft hat on her head also fell to the ground, revealing 2 eye-catching horns. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Xin always felt that the horns seemed sharper than before. Chapter 92, Heaven and Earth Net. Before Xin could take a closer look, he saw Zhuang Yuanying suddenly stand up and run out of the workshop in a manner almost like a wild animal. Her steps were heavy and hurried. When she went out, she even hit her body heavily against the door frame. Half of her shirt was torn, and her skin was scratched, splashing a string of blood. But Zhuang Yuanying was completely unaware. After stepping out of the door, she ran headfirst into a thick wall not far in front. Seeing this, Xin hurriedly followed her and tried to hold her back to prevent her from getting a bloody head. However, in Zhuang Yuanying's unconscious state, her brute force seemed to be a little stronger. A flick of her hand made Xin lose his balance and stumbled into the wall. When Xin adjusted his center of gravity again, Zhuang Yuanying's head was only 1 step away from the wall. At the critical moment, Xin could no longer care about so much and reached forward, trying to use the force to stop the tragedy of a bloody head. However, the force pull of the Jedi apprentice could not restrain Zhuang Yuanying in a violent state. Xin only felt like he was using his little finger to pull the runaway flying boat, and the restraint was as if it did not exist. Next, Zhuang Yuanying crashed into the wall unstoppably, but there was no scene of bloodshed as Xin expected. The moment before the wall touched Zhuang Yuanying, it opened to both sides, revealing a passage leading to a deeper underground. Zhuang Yuanying staggered into the passage, stepped into the air, and rolled down with a series of muffled sounds. Xin caught up at this time, but before he stepped into the passage, the wall in front of him suddenly closed. Scene tried to reach out and pat and pull, but the feedback from the touch fully demonstrated that this wall was thick and solid, and it could not be shaken by human power. But when it came to opening the mechanism, Scene looked around and had no idea. This underground base was still too strange and mysterious for him. Scene thought about it and decided not to act rashly. He would explore the surroundings. If he could not find the mechanism, he would take the elevator back to the ground and ask Enping and others for rescue. It was impossible for them not to know about Zhuang Yuanying's abnormal state. However, just as Scene made up his mind, he heard a piercing but familiar alarm in the corridor. In an instant, Scene shuddered all over, and a strong sense of crisis surged over him, making him feel as if he had returned to the time when he was ambushed in the asteroid belt on the silver ship not long ago. Soon, the facts proved that his situation was even worse than that time. In the passage, dyed blood red by the alarm lights, several automatic weapons suddenly rose up, aiming at Scene and firing mercilessly. Scene had to be thankful that he had just done actual combat special training with Lunan in the past 2 days and was not unfamiliar with this kind of scene of being fired by weapons, so his body reacted correctly at the first time. He jumped back to the processing workshop with a dove, leaned against the wall for cover, and passed by countless energy beams. Judging from the marks left on the ground, walls, and ceiling, the automatic weapons in this passage are obviously lethal enough. Scene hid behind the processing table in the processing workshop, making sure he was safe for the time being, and then tried to calm down and began to think about this sudden change. In a sense, this experience is like a trap that kills people. Zhuang Yuanying used the mechanics technology as bait to transfer him into this trap. The dense automatic weapons in this corridor are enough to wipe out the entire elite team, and it is almost certain to use them against a mere one person. But Scene knew very well that this could not be a trap, because Zhuang Yuanying had no reason to target him, and if Zhuang Yuanying really wanted to kill someone, there were too many opportunities to do it in the base. So these automatic weapons are not targeting him, but Scene shook his head. Although he didn't think Zhuang Yuanying was targeting him, he couldn't think of any other reason to explain why she was weaving a trap on her own territory. Even if everyone in the Red Apricot squad has quirks, this is too weird. But now is not the time to explore the principle. Seeing that the turrets in the corridor are constantly digging the wall and gradually disintegrating the workshop where he hides, Scene knows that he has little time left. At this time, the young Jedi apprentice is very fortunate that he has a communication ring that he never leaves, so that he can ask Enping and others for help at the first time. However, when Scene activated the communication ring, he only heard a harsh rustling sound. The internal communication of this underground base was actually strongly interfered. Scene was immediately convinced. Zhuang Yuanying usually looks timid, but her perversion is really no less than that of several teammates. The next moment, accompanied by several loud explosions, the wall of the workshop finally couldn't stand the ravages. Under the bombardment of 2 missiles, a huge gap was broken. The energy beam like a rainstorm followed closely, sweeping every corner of the workshop. Scene curled up and hid behind the processing table, hoping that the heavy equipment could help him hold on for a few more minutes. Although the communication was blocked by interference, there was no reason why Enping and others could not notice the noise made by the underground base. Time became extremely long at this moment. Scene felt that every breath he took seemed to last 4 years. The processing table behind him was instantly blasted by the high temperature radiation and became hot. Finally, a reassuring voice came from a distance. "Damn, what's going on? Zhuang is sick again." The slightly sharp and piercing exaggerated voice belonged to the team Dr. Zubo. "Stop the alarm first. Is the controller Lunan carrying it?" The steady voice belonged to Enping. "Huh, nonsense." And the iconic sneer naturally did not belong to anyone else. Hearing the voices of these 3 people, Scene breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that he had survived. Because just as the 3 people finished speaking, the overwhelming gunfire in the corridor also stopped. Not long after, outside the workshop, the footsteps of Enping and others approached. Zubo asked in a loud voice with some trepidation, "Scene, are you still alive?" Lunan sneered, "That guy is very lucky. How could he die so easily?" Zubo said again, "If it were you, Would you die easily if you were suddenly fired upon by so many automatic weapons? Damn, Xios Huang even installed a flamethrower here. The fire dragon will be overwhelming when it sprays, and a living person will be turned into a barbecued kebab in an instant. Do you really think that guy is still alive? Lunan said, he has undergone my special training. If he still can't survive. Zubo scolded, it is precisely because of your special training that I think that guy is particularly dangerous. He strained his muscles in the morning, was burned all over his body in the afternoon, and had to stay up late to memorize books at night. Why do you think he can move around in the hail of bullets without any injury as usual? Lunan immediately stopped sneering and said nothing. Zubo said weakly, I actually like that guy. He is the most talented among the new recruits recently. Although he is a bit nagging, his personality can be corrected. As a result, our Red Apricot team is indeed worthy of being the newcomer killer team. No matter how talented the newcomers are, they can't escape death. After a moment of silence, Zubo said again, if something really happens, don't let Xios Huang know. Lunan said, Xios Huang is not mentally retarded. How could he not notice if something really happened? Zubo suggested, if something really happens, when Xios Huang wakes up, you can tell her that scene was transferred away by Bosley. Anyway, he is not the same as us, and suddenly disappearing without a trace is a reasonable ending. Even if Xios Huang has doubts, as long as the three of us insist, she will convince herself to believe it. Lunan pondered for a while, but couldn't refute it. With Zhuang Yuanying's personality, she really couldn't resist the insistence of her teammates. If the people around her insisted that Li Yu was a soft girl, she would probably believe it. Zubo nodded again and said to himself, this method is actually not bad. After all, most young girls' first love ends this way. I wonder how Bosley will explain this. Lunan said, this is about Xios Huang. Bosley won't say anything. And Ping couldn't listen anymore. Can you two stop insisting? That scene is dead. Chapter 93 Medical Bay. Before you win, you should consider losing. This is my professional quality as a doctor. Besides, even if that guy is still alive, he might not be willing to stay after being stabbed in the back for no reason. It is not uncommon for him to ask Bosley for a transfer or even leave Bayan. Zubo gave a very good reason for his remarks just now, and this reason immediately made Ping speechless. Because Zubo was right. From Scene's point of view, he had absolutely sufficient reason to be angry. Not only did he encounter a fatal disaster for no reason, but what was worse was that it was his own family who stabbed him in the back. Even if Zhuang Yuanying herself had an accidental attack, what about the other members of the Red Apricot team? Although they knew that Zhuang Yuanying had this dangerous mental illness, no one reminded Scene in advance, and there was no preventive measure, allowing Scene to almost die underground when he was caught off guard. How different is this behavior from directly killing people? In silence, the team had arrived at the door of the processing workshop, and Ping looked at the mess inside the door and sighed softly. You should have heard what I said just now. From now on, it's up to you to decide whether or not to disappear without a trace. Scene had already made his judgment at this time. He leaned forward from behind the processing table with some difficulty and said, I need a sufficiently reasonable explanation. And Ping was stunned for a moment and couldn't help sighing. It's great that you are still willing to listen to someone's explanation. Xios Huang's incident was indeed just an accident. She didn't mean to harm you. And we had our reasons for hiding this from you before. Of course, in this situation now, no matter what reasons we have, they seem powerless. Please use your own eyes to witness the truth. As Ping spoke, he took a few steps forward and pulled up Scene, forcing a smile and saying, you can actually turn a disaster into a blessing. Xios Huang is a rich woman in the team. When she wakes up, she will give you reasonable compensation. Maybe she can cut your debt to Bosley in half in one fell swoop. Zubo screamed when he heard this. Is there such a good thing? Oh, I seem to have been scolded just now. I'm afraid it won't heal without the priceless burn medicine. However, no matter how loud he shouted, the others just pretended not to hear him. Afterwards, the group left the workshop and, led by Ping, came to the thick wall where Zhuang Yuanying had previously disappeared. Lunan pressed the controller and the wall suddenly split to the left and right, revealing a dark and deep passage leading downward. and Ping was the first to walk in, followed by Scene, while Lunan and Zubo were at the end of the team. Scene was surprised as he walked along. Before, he thought that this deepest base was built by Zhuang Yuanying, but this passage seemed to have a long history. The metal frame supporting this underground passage carried an equally heavy history. Judging from the mottled rust, this passage had a history of at least 30 years. But how old is Zhuang Yuanying? It can't be that she is forever beautiful, obviously in her 40s or 50s, but still maintains the posture of a girl. As if seeing through Scene's doubts, and Ping explained without turning his head, this underground base is not an industry earned by Xiaoxiang. Although I don't deny that she is the best at increasing revenue and reducing expenditure in the team, and currently has the largest amount of savings, it is impossible for her to earn an entire underground factory on her own. This is the legacy left to her by the previous captain. Zubo interrupted, so getting rich through hard work is a pure false proposition. The key is to have a rich father. And Ping ignored Zubo's jokes and continued to explain to Scene. In fact, this entire underground base is the foundation laid by the previous captain. It's just that Xiaoxiang inherited the most essential part of it. Before he finished speaking, he heard Lunan sneer. If the essential part was given to you two to inherit, I'm afraid it would have been squandered long ago. And Ping smiled awkwardly and was speechless. Zubo retorted, how can you, who has always been at the bottom of the deposit list, have the qualifications to laugh at us? Lunan raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect that the always slick team doctor would dare to challenge him. He was thinking about how to teach him a lesson when suddenly an orange light appeared in his field of vision. This passage has come to the end. Zubo smiled triumphantly. He dared to confront Lunan head on, because he saw the right opportunity, and made it inconvenient for Lunan to retaliate immediately. And with Lunan's rough personality, he would forget about this matter soon after missing the opportunity, and let himself take advantage of it. But Zubo soon restrained his smile. The orange light in front of him was getting stronger and stronger, and he actually knew better than anyone what the strange light meant. This was really not an occasion to laugh. However, if Zubo didn't relax his mentality, he really didn't have the confidence to continue walking. Even though he had seen it many times before, the scene at the end of the passage would still make people fall into nightmares from time to time. A moment later, as everyone passed the last corner of the passage, the deepest secret of this underground base was finally exposed. An ellipsoid space with a length and width of more than 50 meters and a height of more than 10 meters appeared in front of everyone. The edges of the space were tightly wrapped with shiny metal plates, and countless lights cast cold light like frost and snow above their heads. In the middle of the space, 36 medical cabins were neatly stacked, filled with orange-red liquid. The sweet color shone through the glass windows of the medical cabins, and intertwined with the snow-white lights outside the cabins, making the entire underground space appear strange. Surrounding the 36 medical cabins were dazzling instruments and equipment, which were closely connected to the medical cabins through complex pipelines, and made ticking sounds of different frequencies from time to time. These sounds stirred each other in the ellipsoidal space, making this orange-red space look even more strange. Then, in the center of the medical cabin, people saw Zhuang Yuanying. The girl had regained her former tranquility. She curled up her slender body in front of a medical cabin and fell into a deep sleep. There was also a woman sleeping in the medical cabin, with more than 10 pipes connecting the medical cabin behind her. She looked much older than Zhuang Yuanying, and her facial features were vaguely similar to Zhuang Yuanying's, and she also had horns on her forehead. The relationship between the two was obvious at a glance. There were also people sleeping in several nearby medical cabins, men, women, young and old, but without exception, they all had horns on their foreheads, showing that they belonged to the same race, and in the medical cabins outside, the situation was slightly terrifying. It was no longer a complete person soaked in the orange-red liquid, but various and indescribable objects. Among them, the larger ones had a meatball with a diameter of nearly 2 meters, which almost filled the space in the medical cabin, and continued to shrink and expand like a heart. The smaller ones were only the size of a fist, and only a human shape could be vaguely seen. Scene stood at the entrance, and felt that the scene in front of him was so weird, that it was hard to describe, and in this weirdness, he even felt a kind of heart-wrenching shock. His breathing became heavy and his face gradually turned pale. Where exactly is this place? Chapter 94 Law. In response to Scene's question, Anping simply patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't be nervous, this is just a carefully arranged prop scene." As he spoke, Anping took the lead in walking into the ellipsoidal space, randomly found a beeping control panel, and stretched out his mechanical arm to lift the shell. The huge metal table was empty inside, with only a simple sound chip faithfully making a beeping sound. Those medical cabins are relatively complicated. In addition to building that shell, you also have to mix nutrient solution with realistic color and consistency, and then find a way to create a test body that can be mistaken for a real one. The whole project is said to be very expensive. In the end, thanks to the help of Lord Bay, it was barely completed. As Anping spoke, he sighed for a while, as if he was immersed in memories. Just a moment later, he shook his head and brought the topic back. "You must be wondering why we went to so much trouble to create this kind of scene. It's simple. When Xiaoxiang went crazy, only this environment could calm her down. No matter how crazy she was before, as long as she slept here, she would be able to recover." Scene was more and more puzzled as he listened. Why would this happen? What on earth did Zhuang Yuanying go through? Anping sighed and said, "Good question, but this question is really hard to explain. I can only say that this used to be her home. Whenever she was frightened by an accident, and it was beyond her ability to bear, she would come here to lick her wounds." Scene was surprised and said, "Home? You mean she used to live in this biological laboratory?" As he asked, Scene's face darkened. Because by carefully observing this carefully crafted prop scene, Scene was able to judge some things. The experiments carried out in this biological laboratory were clearly human experiments. Those men and women soaked in the orange-red nutrient solution were all experimental materials. As for those pieces of flesh that didn't have human shapes in the outer medical cabins, Scene didn't want to think about their origins. Yes, Xiaoxiang used to live in the laboratory. According to her memory, the empty medical cabin over there was her bed. Anping pointed to a medical cabin on the outer edge. His movement seemed weak, and his eyes were half drooping. It seemed that only with this lazy posture could he maintain emotional stability and allow him to explain to Scene smoothly. The one who destroyed the laboratory was Gu Zeng, the former leader of Bei'an and the former captain of the Red Apricot team. He rescued Xiaoxiang from the laboratory and brought her to the deserted area to raise her, but unfortunately, he only rescued Xiaoxiang. As he spoke, Anping couldn't help but sighed. At that time, the few of us were still working diligently at Kyankan Security to make sales, and we had never even heard about what happened in Bei'an. Many things were told to us intermittently by Bosley after he joined the Red Apricot team, but many details are still missing, so we can only guess. But generally speaking, it's a story about a girl who overcame the trauma of her childhood and tried to step into the sunshine, but was not very successful. Although Xiaoxiang tried very hard, the trauma left to her by that laboratory was too severe, and a mere dozen years is far from enough to heal the scars. Whenever she is strongly stimulated in the outside world, and it is difficult for her to maintain her composure, she will inevitably go crazy. Only when she returns here can she let down her guard and return to normal. However, we don't know whether this recovery method is good or bad. Maybe every time she appears to return to normal, she actually deepens her psychological trauma. But other than that, we have no other way. After Anping finished speaking, he sighed again, then shook his head, walked into the center of the scene, picked up the sleeping girl, and walked out. Scene followed Anping and left this strange space. However, halfway through, he couldn't help but ask, why did this happen? As soon as this question came out, even Scene himself felt very naive. The Milky Way is so big, what is impossible to happen? The Republic is brilliant, but almost every place where the light shines will leave a shadow. Even the core area is no exception, let alone this galaxy located in the outer ring, which is close to the Republic. Not long ago, he witnessed the tragedy on DUI 4399. Compared with that, human experiments are not a big deal, but however, Scene clearly saw that the medical cabins and the surrounding instruments and equipment were clearly printed with the label of Xyrun Pharmaceutical. So this is not the occasional behavior of a few villains, but an organized and premeditated crime by a super large enterprise with a status close to the government. This is simply unbelievable. The Kyan Galaxy is not one of those barbaric and backward places where tyrants dictate everything and there are no anti-human customs. On the contrary, this is a prosperous galaxy with a highly developed civilization and people living and working in peace and contentment. So why would such a ruthless thing appear? Is there no law in the Kyan Galaxy? The people of the Red Apricot team clearly felt Scene's anger from this question, but after a moment of silence, they all laughed out loud. This kid is actually asking about the law? Which rich family raised this young lady who is so ignorant of the world? Although everyone found that Scene had many naive and idealistic personalities when they first met him, they never expected that he would yell out such an innocent question in extreme anger. The law? He actually asked about the law. However, after a brief sneer, Ping was the first to stop smiling and responded to Scene's question seriously. Do you mean that you want to let the matter be handled by law? Scene calmed down and nodded. If you want to ask if it is, that's what I mean. Compared with personal judgment, I always prefer legal handling. I know that you don't agree with my philosophy, and many of my ideas may seem too naive to you. But no matter what, I stick to my beliefs. Scene, you may have misunderstood. Scene said seriously, I know that the law cannot solve all problems, and many times it simply cannot solve the problem. But if everyone abandons the law and relies on their own magical powers, then there will definitely be more and more problems. Similarly, I admit that when the law fails, there will always be someone who uses means beyond the law to solve the problem. However, no matter how brilliant and omnipotent those who transcend the law are, there must be someone in this world who firmly guards the bottom line of the law. Scene's righteous speech not only failed to resonate, but made the atmosphere in the passage even more awkward. Lunan sneered and simply turned his head away, no longer paying attention to this topic. Zubo opened his mouth several times, but felt something stuck in his throat. In the end, it was Captain Ping who took on the responsibility of breaking the awkwardness. Scene, if the matter should be handled by the law as you said, then you'd better take Xiao Zhuang to Xiarun Pharmaceutical to surrender yourself now, because that is in line with legal procedures. Scene was stunned when he heard this, and before he could speak, he heard Ping add, and you can rest assured that when it comes to issues concerning Xiao Zhuang, Kyankan Security will absolutely enforce the law impartially and will not commit any illegal acts. The law and justice you uphold will be implemented as soon as possible. When Scene heard this, he certainly understood Ping's implication. Captain means that the laws of the Kyan Galaxy will not protect Zhuang Yuanying. Chapter 95, Contract Spirit. Regarding Scene's question, Ping responded, the summary is correct. According to the legal provisions of Kyankan Group, Zhuang Yuanying does not enjoy full human rights. Her current peaceful life is essentially absconding in fear of crime. All of us are not. She is an absolute criminal. Scene asked in a deep voice, she is a living person, why can't she enjoy human rights? Why? Of course the person who made the law doesn't want Xiao Zhuang to do this. People of this clan enjoy human rights. Moreover, you said that Xiao Zhuang is a living person, but it is a pity that Xiao Zhuang cannot be considered a real person in the Kyan Galaxy. Scene frowned and glanced at the horns on Zhuang Yuanying's forehead. That doesn't make sense. Compared to just having horns on their heads, there are countless weird and intelligent creatures in the galaxy. There are even anacondas living in the space city. Could it be that the Kyankan Group doesn't recognize their human rights? Ping smiled. So you judge whether a creature should have human rights based on its appearance? As long as it looks similar enough to humans, it naturally has human rights. The anaconda seems to be a negative example. Scene frowned even more because of Ping. This is clearly an argument, but having said that, how to judge whether a creature is an intelligent creature and whether it has rights cannot be explained clearly in a few sentences. In fact, so what if you can explain it clearly? Can you decide whether a creature or a group should have power with just one sentence? Who gave you such power? If you like Xiao Zhuang, just do it. I believe that she should enjoy human rights, and I'm filled with indignation at what happened to her. I want to break the shackles immediately and stop all medical experiments. But what is the difference between your behavioral logic and those of those authoritarian tyrants? Scene was silent again. What Ping said is correct. Regardless of the difficulty of determining whether a creature should have rights and interests, at least it is not a matter of one person or one sentence. And in the environment of the Kyan Galaxy, the one who has the power to decide all this is probably the Kyankan group. But why did the Kyankan group persecute Zhuang Yuanying? Judging from the contacts during this period, Zhuang Yuanying is no different from ordinary people except for the horns on her head and her timid personality. Well, her brute strength is amazing, and her mechanical talents are also excellent, but these are not, it cannot constitute a reason for persecution. When Scene asked this question, and Ping couldn't help but let out a Relvenant-style sneer. This made Scene very uncomfortable, as if everything he was thinking was beyond the control of the other party. This conversation seemed to have been rehearsed in advance, and he was just playing a supporting role to set off his opponent. Next, Scene heard and Ping say, "Your question is strange. It seems that there must be some reason to persecute a race. In other words, as long as there is some reason, you can persecute a race. But unfortunately, this kind of absurd logic does prevail in reality. The population of the dry galaxy exceeds 100 billion, but except for the space city, Lee, if you can find more than 1% of alternative intelligent creatures, you think this is good. Why? Is the Kyan Galaxy so remote that outsiders can't find it?" Scene shook his head. The geographical location was certainly not the reason. In fact, the special population structure of the Kyan Galaxy had already existed before he entered the Kyan Galaxy. When I checked the relevant information in front of the galaxy, I paid careful attention to it, but I never had a clear answer. It's actually very simple, because people here don't like aliens. Although the idea of rejecting aliens has never been put on the table, it is a concept that many people in the Kyan Galaxy hold in their hearts, and it has a very deep historical accumulation. After joining before the Republic, the living conditions of the natives of the Kyan Galaxy were very bleak. Of course, as the relationship with the Republic became closer and later became a member with a special status, the xenophobic situation in the galaxy has greatly improved. But unfortunately, however, the inertia of history will not disappear, and some local alien races that were oppressed in the past will not be liberated because of the improvement in the treatment of other alien races. Now, even the anacondas can live freely in the Kyan Galaxy, but they are small. Zhuang can't. Scene only felt that this matter was becoming more and more unreasonable, but he still suppressed the sense of absurdity in his heart and said, "In any case, this kind of discrimination seriously violates the spirit of the Republic, even if the Kyankan group can reverse right and wrong, classifying a certain race as inferior creatures. But if the Republic finds out the truth..." Before he could finish his words, Scene was interrupted, and Ping sighed. "So do you expect the Republic to bring justice to the galaxy? If the Republic was really that useful, the Kyankan group would have collapsed 10 times long ago. Or, in your eyes, does the Republic always be fair and shining?" Scene had to be silent about it. Overall, the Republic is of course brilliant, and the civilization and ideas it symbolizes are worthy of everyone to follow and protect. But where there is light, there are shadows. As Master has traveled around the world over the years, Scene has seen too many flaws in the ointment. The Republic is great, but the Republic is not perfect, let alone omnipotent. Many problems can only be left there, and many tragedies can only be allowed to happen. In comparison, what is the racial persecution in the Kyan Galaxy? In fact, as a member of the Republic, the Kyan Galaxy is somewhat special in all aspects. But after so many years of interaction, does the Republic really know nothing about the problems here? Scene certainly had answers in his mind, but he didn't know how to face them. At this time, Scene missed his master even more. If the GD master could be around, he would be able to easily answer these questions and point out the right path for his apprentice. Unfortunately, Scene is now left to fend for himself. And just when Scene was lost in thought, and Ping spoke again, and continued to add insult to injury. In fact, the Kyankan group's work will only be more refined and meticulous than you expect. Although the dragon tribe that Xiaoxiang belongs to is still a low-level creature with a status similar to that of a monkey lizard, but a group has been doing evil for many years. Of course it has also considered the problem of crimes being exposed. If one day they are forced to liberate the dragon people, what do you think they will do? Scene only felt strange. If that day came, then they would honestly liberate the dragon people. What else would they need to do? Is it possible that we still need to worry about the dragon tribe settling its historical debts? And Ping said, the Kyan galaxy is a place ruled by giant companies, and the core of the company is the pursuit of profit. The dragon tribe is a valuable experimental material for Zyran medicine. Do you think such a large company will be willing to let go? So they have already made plans. Even if the dragon tribe is legally liberated, they will still have ways to continue to control this ethnic group. Kyankan group has a very important medical security law. According to the provisions of it, some diseases are difficult to cure. People with congenital diseases must sign a medical volunteer contract when they are born. The terms of this contract are very cleverly designed. They seem fair and righteous, and are purely based on humanitarian considerations. It provides a chance to extend life for those who are born with no cure, but in reality it is treating people as cheap material and squandering them. Scene couldn't help but ask, can't you quit? In theory, of course. Yes. After all, it doesn't look good when you get an irrevocable contract of betrayal. According to the contract, although the volunteers are required to sign the contract when they are born, they can come and go freely during the entire experiment, and no one can fault it. But in fact, any dragon who escapes control will immediately face sky-high compensation claims. The pharmaceutical company will immediately issue a statement claiming that the volunteers' withdrawal midway has caused serious losses to the company. The personal freedom of the volunteers will be compromised before the debt is settled. Must be restricted. Then many appraisal agencies will issue various certificates indicating that the volunteers who should flee are still capable of continuing to perform their contracts, so the pharmaceutical company can reasonably and legally bring the person back to the laboratory for various purposes. An experiment to make up for the loss. In short, there will be no violation of the law in the whole process. The elites in the galaxy, who have received the highest level of legal education, have designed every detail to be impeccable, although it has not yet been put into practice. But I think this is probably the spirit of the law you are pursuing. Scene felt his throat dry and was completely speechless. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, The Necessity of Distance. What Ping said was certainly not the legal spirit that Scene pursued. This kind of legal procedure designed for the purpose of harming individuals, no matter how sophisticated, is an absolute evil law and should be amended or even abolished. However, it is not so simple to judge whether a law is an evil law. Scene could not have concluded that everything he saw before his eyes was from the evil law of the Kyankan group, based on Anping's words. What if Anping was lying? Or, even if he himself did not intend to lie, but he was misled? In the long conversation just now, Anping's performance was very easy, and he repeatedly blocked Scene from speaking, as if he was prepared to face Scene's questions in advance. This attitude was completely inconsistent with Anping's usual style, so Scene suspected that the words were mostly from the speech he copied from somewhere. In other words, Anping was just relaying other people's views, so the reliability of this second-hand or even third-hand information was very questionable. If we want to judge right and wrong, we need a more comprehensive investigation and more conclusive evidence. But of course, there are not always conditions for him to conduct a comprehensive investigation and collect evidence. Now, let alone caring about the human rights situation of the dragon people, he can't even protect himself. So, before the truth or conclusion is reached, how should he face the evil law of the Kyankan group? Report to Kyankan security? That's too ridiculous. For a moment, the young Jedi apprentice fell into unprecedented confusion. And this confusion is enough for Anping. The sleepy man glanced at Scene with his peripheral vision, and couldn't help but smile. It's a great start, to make a person who is stubborn in his heart waver. I believe that as he witnesses more and more things with his own eyes, the innocence in his heart will gradually dissipate. In fact, Anping doesn't hate Scene's innocence, although it's really annoying that he has to worry about the issue of killing when he is on a mission. But who among the people in the red apricot team doesn't have some annoying problems? In comparison, SYN is already the cutest one. Besides, which veteran didn't come from an innocent era? More than a decade ago, Anping, Lunan, and Zubo were all high-spirited and idealistic recruits. In terms of innocence, they were 10 times more innocent than SYN is now. Many of their childish words and deeds made people blush when they recalled them later. However, after more than 10 years of hardships, even the most childish people will grow up. Although their appearance after growth is somewhat distorted, Anping still likes himself now more than the appearance of being beaten by society in the past. Similarly, Anping is also looking forward to SYN's growth and wants to see how long his innocence can last. In silence, the group came to Zubo's medical room. The elderly and virtuous team doctor skillfully placed Zhuang Yuanying on the bed and prepared the injection for her. SYN couldn't help but feel moved when he saw this. Has she had many attacks? Zubo said without turning his head. The situation is much better now. In the early years, she would go crazy every few days, especially. He paused here. Lunan sneered and added, especially when she sees you. The probability of an attack is particularly high. Zubo said embarrassedly, so didn't I try wearing a mask later? Her attack was the worst when you were wearing a mask. I wore the wrong mask the first time. She came suddenly, so I had to pull off a mask. Who would have thought it was a Dressler mask? Zubo explained awkwardly. Anyway, it was later proved that it was the smell of a doctor on me that triggered her stress response, and over the years, she has adapted to this environment and basically won't go crazy. But occasional attacks are still very troublesome. Many conventional drugs have no effect on her, and medicinal materials are not easy to find. After this injection, I have to ask Bosley to purchase more. Lunan added insult to injury. The drugs are ineffective, in large part, because she underwent complex drug trials when she was young, and our second-rate doctors still can't figure out the composition of those drugs. Zubo immediately protested. Don't force me. If I could even analyze the formula of the drug experiment more than 10 years ago, I would have rejuvenated myself long ago. Why would I be ridiculed by you every day for my appearance? Listening to his teammates bickering around him, SYN shook his head gently, knowing that they were just using this kind of joke to relieve their psychological pressure. Looking at the pale girl sleeping soundly on the hospital bed, SYN felt indescribably heavy. Although SYN almost died in the underground base because of Zhuang Yuanying's illness not long ago, he certainly didn't resent her, but just felt that this dragon girl was really pitiful. If I had the spare energy, I really wanted to help her. Anping sighed. Don't think about it, you can't help. If we could help, would we have sat idly by and watched her suffer for so many years? Be it Zubo or Lunan, everyone has done their best, but her situation is indeed too special, and it makes people feel helpless. SYN asked, what exactly are the dragon people? Zubo said, who knows? It's probably because they have horns on their heads, and look a bit like the dragon in mythology. Anping said, huh? Isn't it because their bloodline is rare? Lunan was also surprised and said, I thought you just made up the name. SYN was stunned. You guys who claim to have done your best can't even figure out Zhuang Yuanying's race? Question mark? Anping coughed and explained. Don't get me wrong, our concern for Zhuang is not fake, but there are some things that the more you know, the better. SYN was about to ask a question when he heard Lunan ask first, if we already knew your origins and identity now, can you still chat and laugh with us here? SYN immediately shut up. If his identity as a Jedi apprentice was exposed, the tacit understanding between him and Liu would no longer exist, and the situation would indeed be very awkward. Anping said, the same reasoning applies. From Zhuang's perspective, she may not be willing to let others know about her past experiences, even those of us who are the closest to her. Lunan interrupted, wake up, what qualifications do you have to be the closest? Her relationship with Chen Sanwen is better than yours, and her closest person is always Bei. In the final analysis, no matter how hard we try to show our intimacy, we are always aliens to her. Anping couldn't help but sigh when he heard this. Those who are not of my kind must have different hearts. This sentence is the same from Zhuang's perspective. So we would rather maintain a certain distance from Zhuang. The fact is that this is also one of the reasons why she has had fewer attacks in recent years. After these words, everyone in the Red Apricot team stopped talking at the same time. It was obvious that their moods were so heavy that they could no longer have a relaxed conversation. By the way, it was finally the team Dr. Zubo who broke the silence. If you want to know about the dragon people, you can check the database. The former captain left a lot of things there. Although Xiao's young and we can't get close, your situation seems to be different. Scene was stunned. Me. It was me who irritated her to the point of insanity just now. The allergen that caused the irritation would not be you. If you could irritate her, Bossy would not take you back. There must be other reasons. On the other hand, you have only joined the team for a short time and are still a stranger, but Xiaoxiang is obviously not afraid of you. This treatment is indeed completely different from that of us ugly people, Zubo said and let out an exceptionally heavy sigh. Chapter 97 More Mysteries. After leaving the infirmary, Scene went straight to the database in the underground base. After experiencing the previous shocking changes, Scene's thoughts have been completely focused on the dragon tribe. He wants to know about the characteristics, history, current situation, and other knowledge of this tribe. Vaguely, he felt that the secret of the Draconians was probably related to their attempt to come to investigate the galaxy. What's more, even if he doesn't have the energy to solve Zhuang Yuanying's problems now, he can't just sit idly by. Even just knowing a little bit more is good. When Scene pushed open the door of the database, a smell of decay hit his face. As far as you can see, various memory cards are piled up like mountains, and from the thick accumulation of dust, it can be seen that this place has been neglected and lacked by people. Most of the time, after being left behind by the former captain, they were completely abandoned and became trash that no one wanted. Therefore, Anping and others don't know much about the dragon tribe. Is it because they want to protect Xiaoxiang, or because these people have no desire for knowledge at all? It's really hard to say. After sighing, Scene searched for the information he wanted through the computer in the database. The dragon tribe is a semi-indigenous creature in the Kyan galaxy. They are born with evil powers and their encounters are unknown. Scene found such a record in a folk culture book of the Kyan galaxy. Although it was only a few words and written hundreds of years ago, it still gave Scene a rough outline. Although it is not clear how this semi-indigenous is defined, the meaning of the words innate evil power and unknown encounters is clear at a glance. Anping once said that the people of the Kyan galaxy are naturally xenophobic. So one can only imagine what attitude the people of the Kyan galaxy will take towards a race that looks different from humans and possesses extraordinary abilities. After that, Scene went through a lot of related information one after another. The contents were similar, and they were all recording the anomalies and ominousness of the dragon people. From this information, Scene restored more details. The dragon tribe can be said to be a historical relic of the Kyan galaxy. They were active in the long past when the colonists first came here. From the current perspective, it is almost a mythical age. Therefore, various legends and stories have become bizarre and difficult to understand accepted. The credible records about this race gradually ceased hundreds of years ago. After comparing several documents, Scene was generally convinced that the dragon people had several characteristics compared to humans. They had horns on their heads and were extremely powerful. In addition, this tribe often played the role of religious leaders in the early years, providing services such as divination, sacrifices, and praying for rain to the colonists, who had a very low level of civilization at that time. They also left behind the legend that the dragon people could call the wind and rain. But after Scene thought about it carefully, he did not agree with the records left by these many documents. Because generally speaking, when the level of civilization is low, individuals with extraordinary abilities can easily form religious groups and deify themselves through religious legends and other methods. As these religious legends continue to spread, the content will become more and more distorted. For example, the story that the dragon man can control the wind and rain, from today's perspective, is obviously a lie. If the dragon man really has the ability to control the atmospheric environment of a planet by himself, how could he be regarded as a monkey lizard-like creature and locked up in a medical cabin as experimental material? The most reasonable judgment is that dragon people can detect climate changes more keenly than other people by virtue of their organs that are different from ordinary people, and then arrange religious rituals based on the causes, showing the powerful magic power of calling wind and rain. This ability to sense the weather is essentially not worth mentioning. Even many insects can do similar things, but insects cannot become religious leaders. However, this period of history as a religious leader has obviously become the source of the tragedy of the dragon people. As the civilization of the Kyan galaxy gradually developed and prospered, the living space of the dragon people was drastically compressed, and the special status brought by religion was quickly lost, even causing a strong backlash. SYN found words of extreme hatred towards the dragon people in many historical documents. Some of these stories record how the dragon tribe relied on their religious status to oppress all living beings and bring suffering. Others record how the dragon tribe used their innate extraordinary abilities to do evil and cause trouble. However, in addition to recording the stories of the Draconians, these documents were also filled with extreme hatred and naked prejudice against alien creatures, so much so that SYN frowned and could only put a question mark on the authenticity of these documents. But in any case, these documents at least prove one thing: the history of the persecution of the dragon people is very deep, and it is not simply the vile doings of the Kyankan group. To put it even more extreme, as long as these historical accumulations are still there, even if the Kyankan group is immediately disbanded and replaced by a new ruler, the treatment of the dragon people will still not change, and the soft hat on Zhuang Yuanying's head will still not be removed. SYN was lost in thought while flipping through the information, and time slipped away quietly. When he finally finished checking the memory card in his hand, he only felt dizzy and had a sore back. Unknowingly, he had been sitting in the database for almost a whole day, and the communication ring on his wrist clearly showed the time of the next day. SYN smiled helplessly. He used to have this problem of being obsessed with studying and forgetting time. In severe cases, he could even go without food and water for days and nights until he was almost exhausted. Later, Master Mostima was responsible for waking him up in time every time. Now that the master is gone, no one can stop his addiction. SYN shook his head, temporarily driving away the tiredness that accumulated in his mind. At the same time, he was also a little strange. Why didn't Enping and others come to him? It was his turn to cook yesterday. Could it be that everyone wanted to not disturb his study? How about collective irritation? SYN didn't know that Enping and others were full of complaints because they couldn't wait for anyone to cook in the restaurant. But when they thought of waking SYN up, a new round of hell teaching would begin after a delicious meal. Everyone feels that eating 1 or 2 canned foods occasionally is not a bad way to relax. If SYN is willing to study on his own, then let him study on his own. It is best to study for 10.5 days and delay the time limit required by Bosley. Then everyone will be happy. And Xiaoxiang has made a contribution to the team while he was unconscious. Contribute. After SYN walked out of the database, he saw that he was simply left alone and didn't do anything. He silently returned to his room, washed briefly, opened another can to fill his stomach, and then lay down on the bed to prepare rest. However, after closing his eyes, there were still chaotic thoughts lingering in his mind, and there was no sleepiness at all. In the database, SYN undoubtedly gained a lot, but the doubts that arose from it only increased. The more he learns about the past of the dragon people, the more curious SYN becomes about the current situation of the dragon people. Because even the most recent credible information is more than 300 years ago. What have the dragon clan experienced in the past 300 years? Understanding the past is just a result of SYN's thirst for knowledge, but understanding the present can solve practical problems. Although SYN is very clear that his top priority is to find his master, find out the truth about Nanhela's death, and at the same time expose and sanction the evil deeds framed by Kyankan security. But it was impossible for SYN to turn a deaf ear to the tragedy of the dragon tribe that was happening in front of him. As long as I can free my hands later, SYN thought, and simply opened his eyes. Since you can't sleep, don't force yourself to go to sleep. Let's investigate further while your energy level is still there. SYN does not think that no one really knows anything that is not recorded in the database. On the contrary, the truth is probably close at hand, and you just need to find the right direction of inquiry. Chapter 98 Negligence. Scene immediately thought of the Omnivore Tavern, which was not far from the underground base of the Red Apricot team. It was the most bustling place in the surrounding area and even the entire wasteland. Although it was called a tavern, it was actually a huge building like a castle, attracting all kinds of people. The Omnivore Tavern, just like its name, has the tolerance of embracing all rivers. In other words, it has the ability to provide thoughtful services to all kinds of people. In the wasteland, the most useful service is the word intelligence. Unlike the civilized city with bright lights and wine, the living conditions in the wasteland are extremely complex. Even with a leader like Liu, the nature of this area cannot be changed. Almost every day, someone dies inexplicably, and every day, a new dangerous area is marked on the map. Where not to go, and who not to provoke, are all required courses for survival in the wasteland. And the Omnivore Tavern is the best classroom. If there was anyone in the wasteland who might know the details of the dragon people, then apart from mystics like Liu, they could only be found in the Omnivore Tavern. Scene jumped out of bed and got ready, but before he could walk out of the base gate, he was blocked by Zubo, who looked fierce. "Wait, kid, where are you going?" Hearing this murderous voice, Scene was startled and lowered his head, looking at the 83-year-old doctor with heavy dark circles under his eyes, who looked like he had aged 10 years. The Jedi apprentice could not help but ask instead of answer, "Why are you so embarrassed? Has something happened to Zhuang Yuanying?" Zubo was even more annoyed. "Xiao Zhuang slept well, all because of you. I thought you would definitely rest all day today. I played cards with Anping all night last night. Who knew that you would study all night and now you don't sleep well, but run out to hang around?" Scene was simply laughing and crying. "You guys are asking for trouble, and you blame me." But on second thought, he was shocked again. "Wait, why do you sound like you are spying on me?" Zubo was stunned for a moment, and then he was annoyed. He was also confused because of staying up late. A veteran of Hansing, he actually leaked the secret as soon as he opened his mouth. It would be strange if he didn't get laughed at by Lunan and had pneumothorax when he went back. However, compared with other teammates, Zubo's biggest advantage is that he is smart enough. Seeing Scene's suspicion, Zubo thought of a reasonable explanation. "You saw such a powerful thing yesterday. We are afraid that you can't hold back and act impulsively. Of course, we have to pay more attention," Zubo said, shaking his head as if he was wronged. "I didn't expect that our good intentions would be regarded as malicious surveillance by you. It's true that trust between people is as difficult as ascending to heaven. The Kyan people firmly believe that those who are not of my race must have different hearts, which is reasonable." Scene was so shocked by these words that his breath stagnated in his chest. He felt that Zubo was undoubtedly talking nonsense, but he couldn't find a suitable reason to refute. He had to bow his head and apologize. Zubo was relieved when he saw Scene bow his head. This kid is particularly stubborn in character, so as long as he can't speak and can't refute, there is no need to worry about him forcing his way out. But then, Scene paused for a moment and said, "Thank you for your concern, but I won't act impulsively. I just want to go out to the Omnivore to get some information, so please rest assured." As he spoke, Scene walked out, intending to pass Zubo and go to the tavern. Zubo was shocked. "Wait, your reaction is very unreasonable. Under normal circumstances, you should feel guilty and blame yourself for your misunderstanding at this time, and then go back to your room to sleep, right? Why are you still so lively?" Scene was surprised and said, "It's just a simple misunderstanding. There is no need to feel guilty and blame yourself, right? I didn't trust my teammates just now, but you didn't trust me either. You just assumed that I would definitely act impulsively. We are all the same." Zubo was blocked so much that his eyes went black, and he cursed in his heart. He almost forgot that, although Scene was stubborn, he was definitely not stupid. On the contrary, his brain was more flexible than others, and it was definitely not easy to fool him. Zubo was speechless for a moment, so Scene smiled and patted his shoulder. "Don't worry, this is a wasteland after all. It's our own territory. Nothing will happen." Zubo was really not comforted at all and watched Scene leave the base. His figure disappeared in the morning light of the rising stars. After a moment, Zubo sighed in front of the door and made a decision. Forget it, go back to sleep. If Bosley investigates, just throw the responsibility to Xiaoxiang. Anyway, Bosley will never be angry with Xiaoxiang, and it would be a waste of talent if she is not blamed. Just as the senior team doctor of the Red Apricot team gave up his duties without hesitation, Liu was earnestly fulfilling his duties as a leader in a civilian tavern far south of the Kyan Galaxy's capital city Zhijing. At the bar, Liu drank his third expensive glass of strong liquor briskly, causing a red bartender robot behind the bar to whistle in amazement, although the whistle was a little out of tune because the voice module had been out of repair for a long time. Around the bar, several drunken drinkers applauded loudly and cheered continuously. It has been a long time since this bar has seen a hero who can drink 3 glasses of strong liquor in a row without changing his expression. Generally speaking, a grown man would slide under the bar as long as he took a sip and then be stripped naked and thrown into the alley behind the bar. After completing this eye-catching feat, Liu just smiled faintly, and his elegant smile intoxicated the ladies sitting next to him. Afterwards, Liu pointed his finger at the bar counter and looked at the bartender with still clear eyes. Next, it's time to tell your story. The red etiquette robot let out a slightly off-key sigh. Yes, I lost the bet. I didn't expect that you have such a good alcohol tolerance. Then, according to the agreement just now, I will give you the story you want. Then, the robot leaned forward and told the story in a voice so weak that only they could hear it, about a middle-aged man who came to the bar alone to hire a killer more than a month ago. I have been serving in this bar for more than 30 years and have received countless guests. However, I have rarely seen a guest like that one who looked out of place the moment he walked in. Although he was wearing cheap long shirt and trousers, trying his best to look like a commoner, and deliberately speaking with the commoner accent of South City. But let alone me, even the drunkard in the corner could tell at a glance that he looked like a runaway young lady who came here to experience the life of the lower class. After a pause, the robot wanted to keep the suspense, but Liu was unmoved. He just continued to reach out and tap the bar lightly, urging him to get into the main story as soon as possible. Chapter 99 Thriller Story. The tavern has always been unwelcome to guests like Liu who like to rush people straight to the main line and have no patience. Because according to the statistics of this etiquette robot who likes to tell stories, the patience of guests is often positively correlated with their ability to pay. A listener who enjoys stories and explores details will not only order a few more drinks when listening to stories, but also often give more tips to the storyteller in order to hear more jokes. Unfortunately, Liu is obviously not a high quality customer, and his distinctive dangerous characteristics also made the robot give up the roundabout story plan. The robot said, "We were all secretly betting on which garbage dump the middle-aged man who obviously came to the wrong place would end up lying in until dawn with a bruised face. But that time all of us made a mistake. He got a Xia Yuan coin from somewhere. You should know that in Zhijing, people who hold Xia Yuan coin are blessed by the Xia family, and no matter how daring a person is, he dares not have improper thoughts about the holder of the coin." Liu was of course well aware of this common sense of Zhijing. He nodded and signaled the robot to continue. When everyone in the bar saw the Xia Yuan coin, they gave up all their thoughts. I just wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. After all, people holding Xia Yuan coins often mean trouble. According to statistics, these people, well, to make a long story short, he was obviously well prepared. I don't know where he heard the story from, but anyway, he found me, told me a story, and then asked me to contact some strong and reliable mercenaries for him to complete a revenge mission. As the robot spoke, he sighed in a distorted tone, deliberately exaggerating his helplessness. "Listen, this is embarrassing. I'm just a bartender. Where can I find him some strong and reliable mercenaries? The strongest people in this bar are probably a group of drunken hooligans. But he has Xia Yuan coins and knows our business, so I can't refuse him. I have to do my best to meet his requirements." As luck would have it, he really ran into the right person that day. At this point, the robot stretched his slender neck forward as far as it could, causing the telescopic spring to squeak harshly, as if it was about to be unable to support the huge head. And the flat metal face was almost touching Liu's face. You have heard of the name Suzaku, right? Liu tried not to show a sarcastic smile and tapped his fingers a little harder in front of the bar. The robot quickly shrank its head and said, "Sorry, I asked a stupid question. How could a sophisticated person like you not have heard of the bad reputation of Suzaku?" That customer wanted to find mercenaries, and just then a few of Suzaku's small leaders came to the bar. Don't you think this is a coincidence? In the entire Kyan galaxy, I'm afraid no one is more unchoosy than Suzaku. As long as you pay, they will do anything. Not to mention revenge for others, even if they take action against some big shots in the upper class. Suzaku's people will not hesitate. Hearing this, Liu almost couldn't help laughing. Later, I opened a private room for them in the basement, and they went to discuss the terms on their own. I don't know what they talked about specifically. About 2 hours later, they walked out of the room and went their separate ways. Well, that's all I know. Before the robot finished speaking, Liu's finger suddenly stopped. A shallow fingerprint suddenly appeared on the heavy solid wood bar, leaving fingerprints on hardwood with flesh and blood. It is natural that the robot's slender neck can be easily strangled. Liu's deterrent move immediately caused the robot's internal voltage to become disordered. Okay, I admit that I omitted some content. As you expected, there is indeed a wiretap installed in the private room. After all, if someone discusses something too outrageous in our bar and is investigated by the higher-ups afterwards, we will never have a good ending if we know nothing about it. Liu sneered and did not comment on this weak whitewashing defense, but urged the other party to tell the truth with an increasingly stern look. The robot was helpless and said, "Guest, I didn't mean to conceal it on purpose, but the news I heard that day, the fewer people know the better, and I also suggest that you stop here." Liu did not speak, but just took out a beautifully engraved commemorative coin from his pocket. The moment he saw the commemorative coin, the robot made an involuntary buzzing sound, and it was obvious that its processor was groaning due to the abnormal voltage. Anyone with basic judgment would know the value of the Kyankan commemorative coin in Liu's hand, which was issued 300 years ago and circulated only in a very small range. In particular, the 10-digit number on the commemorative coin was of extraordinary significance. Even if it was only considered from the economic value, it was a treasure enough to buy the entire bar. So the robot did not hesitate any longer and told the shocking secret without hesitation. That middle-aged man should be a member of the Nun family, or to be more precise, a traitor to the Nun family. He hired Suzaku's pirates in order to assassinate his young master, the eldest daughter of the Nun family, Nan Wuiao. Because once Nan Wuiao dies, the Nun family will be extinct in a short period of time, and just establishing the next legal heir will be enough to cause family strife for a long time. During this time, those families that have been coveting Nanming's capital for a long time can go on a quest to their heart's content. At the end, the middle-aged man claimed that he was serving the Ma family, and also publicized that the action had been tacitly approved by the board of directors, so Suzaku could boldly ambush and assassinate the eldest daughter of the Nun family. This kind of thing is indeed something that only the 4 major families can do. Liu did not respond, but just stared at the robot coldly. The robot defended itself. "These are all true. I'm not talking nonsense. How dare I say such things casually? I heard it clearly at the time." Nan Wuiao's name appeared many times in their conversation. The middle-aged man even designed an ambush location and tactics for Zook. He was definitely well prepared. Liu asked, "Where are the monitoring records?" All the records at the time were destroyed by the boss. After all, the risk of leaving such things behind is too great. It is really not something that a small bar like ours can afford. This is also true. If you don't believe it, I can't help it," the robot said, trying to use the limited movable parts of its face to put on a begging expression. Liu pondered for a while, flicked his fingers, and threw the valuable Kyankan commemorative coin into the storage box on the robot's chest. Enough, that's it. Chapter 100. Who is responsible? After leaving the bar, Liu let out a long breath, and a mocking smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He turned his wrist, and suddenly turned out another commemorative coin. The golden coin danced between his fingers as if alive, making it difficult to see the details on the coin. However, for the assistant robot standing next to Liu, which has a high-speed imaging device. Even if Liu doubled the speed of flipping the coin, the front and back of the coin were still clearly visible. Naturally, the unique commemorative number on the Kyankan commemorative coin can also be seen clearly. The number on the coin in Liu's hand is exactly the same as the one he just threw to the etiquette robot. Frequent use of counterfeit coins will greatly increase the risk of identity exposure. Assistant Bei gave his own tips in a cold tone. Liu smiled upon hearing this, put the coin back into his pocket, and asked, "So you expect me to give him the real thing? Use a genuine commemorative coin to buy a fake news? If I were so stupid, you would only scold me more fiercely now." Bei asked, "Are you sure he gave me fake news?" "Of course I'm sure. I just went to 2 bars and happened to come to the scene of Nanze's house murder. The whole process was recorded by someone. Even the etiquette robot in front of the bar can tell the story in detail and vividly. If this is not fake news, then I'm lucky, and it is unforgivable. Looking back on my life experience, I have never been so lucky." As an assistant, Bei is no longer surprised by Liu's specious logic. Although her logic circuit clearly gives a negative judgment, her many years of experience as an assistant have made her know how to temporarily suppress her doubts. Because no matter how unreasonable Liu's words are, he has amazing accuracy in this kind of vague judgment. Since he is sure that the news in the bar is fake, it is most likely true. "So, what should we do next?" Liu said. "Let's first reply to our employer Nanujin and pass on the story of the etiquette robot to him as it is." Bei's logic circuit suddenly became more confused. "Didn't you say that it was fake news?" Liu said. "Does truth or falsehood matter? Nanujin sent us such a high-priced commission, and he obviously didn't want the truth, but silver to endorse his story." Bei suddenly realized. "You mean Nanujin paid you to give false testimony?" Liu said. "Otherwise, why would such a simple intelligence investigation work be worth such a high price? Nanujin is not an ignorant lady, and she is so generous in paying, which is almost a clear indication of the problem. For such a generous big customer, of course we must do our best to meet the other party's needs. Otherwise how can we continue to cooperate and defraud money in the future?" These words made Bei silent. As Liu's high-quality assistant and the supreme leader of the Silver Knights, this robot with extraordinary performance often has performance that surpasses that of its original owner. Especially when dealing with some administrative work, she can make accurate judgments that are difficult for humans to achieve. However, when it comes to vague judgments such as political schemes, this robot knows very well that, even if its computing performance is 10 times stronger, it is still far inferior to its master. So when Liu has made a clear judgment, Bei generally will not argue anymore. However, this time, she finds it difficult to agree no matter what. After a moment, Bei said, "You should know what Nanze's house incident means to Nan Wuoyao and to the Nan family. You are now giving false testimony for Nanujin. Are you going to stand on Nanujin's side and give up Nan Wuoyao?" Liu said, "There is no evidence now to prove that Nanujin has any unfavorable intentions towards Miss Nan. Perjury does not necessarily mean that there are bad intentions. It is very likely that Nanze's how did have a rebellious heart and was plotting against his master, but there were some things in the inside that were not convenient for Nan Wuoyao to know too much, so he simply packaged up a half-true and half-false news and threw it to Nan Wuoyao to reassure her. This is actually a common method used by guardians, just like a poor father who comforts his daughter after his wife runs away with someone, saying that her mother was just a poor father who went to work far away. In response to such remarks, Bei's logic circuit immediately gave a signal called anger. Liu immediately added, "In addition, when Miss Nan was in trouble, it was Nanujin who first stepped forward to help her. He was also the only one who stepped forward to help Nan Wuoyao. Now even Nan Wuoyao himself has chosen to trust Nanujin, so why should I doubt him?" Bei said, "Nan Wuoyao's trust is probably because he has no choice." Liu then asked in return, "So do we have a choice? What's the benefit of doubting Nanujin? What's the use? Miss Nan is now short of living expenses. The balance of the last escort mission was paid by Nanujin. And when the Silver Knights were mercenaries, they were always responsible only to the party that paid." Bei asked, "So what you mean is to give up Nan Wuoyao?" Whether to give up or not is up to Nan Wuiyao herself. Liu said, we are neither Nan Wuiyao's parents nor her lackeys. Our partners, or the object of our dependence, is the Nan family of the 4 major families, not a quasi-heir who has no real power. If the eldest lady really wants to know why Nan Zhao betrayed her, it would be better to talk to me in person instead of entrusting it to others. However, I'm afraid she can't do it in a short time. After saying this, Liu exhaled a long breath of alcohol and then stretched out his arm to Bei. The assistant tacitly took out a hangover injection from the storage bag on his waist and injected it into Liu's vein, allowing the drunken knight commander to continue to maintain his sanity. I have to remind you again that this hangover drug cannot be used repeatedly. You can't use this method to sober up within 1 month. Liu said, don't worry, the next month is my vacation time. This kind of frontline work running around is really not suitable for me. You didn't have to come in person. Liu sighed. If there were a few more people who are good at thinking in the Knights Templar, then I really wouldn't have to work hard myself. It's a pity that everyone in the group has been spoiled by you and become useless over the years. When they encounter problems, they come to cry and beg Lord Bei for help. As the saying goes, a loving mother often has a spoiled child. Damn it, don't inject so fast. Do you want to burst my blood vessels? I'm just kidding. Bei then slowed down the injection. Okay, anyway, the work on Nan Eugen's side has come to an end. It's time to do our own work next. Haha, seen as such a wonderful guy. The more we investigate, the more fun we have. Bei took back the injection and said coldly, what you call fun is running into one dead end after another? We have been investigating and Ziying for 3 days, and there is not even a single clue that can be used. From this point of view, you are indeed not suitable for frontline work. Liu argued, if you understand my job so, it is too shallow, and no wonder you can only be a mere assistant. With my ability, I can't break through the peripheral intelligence network in 3 days. It only means that the confidentiality level of this matter is high enough, and the truth they are trying to hide is shocking enough. Bei rarely stopped mocking his master, but asked, so do you have a way to break through now? Of course there is. It's the same as always. If there is something that even I can't investigate, then I will entrust it to a professional. Well, the time I agreed to meet him is almost up, and I'm going to have a drink at the bar. The location is. When Bei heard Liu talking about professionals, he was immediately surprised. You made an appointment with Chen Zhuanghan. There are only a handful of professionals in the field of intelligence who can make Liu feel ashamed in the entire Kyan galaxy, and it is even more rare for them to be asked out for drinks by Liu. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.